and gentlemen, will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First order of business is to approve the order of the agenda.
Are there any changes on the order of agenda?
There is one change. Item number 5 in the regular agenda, where the West Fargo recognition will be moved to the number 1 position this evening, because we have a number of guests here that we're going to acknowledge, and we're going to allow them to get in and out quickly.
Thank you. I'll make the motion to approve.
And move to approve the agenda as presented with one change. All those, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Approval of the minutes, October 1st, 2018, have been distributed. Are there any additions or any corrections?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Second. Commissioner Olson. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of October 1st, 2018. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is item D, building permits. Building permits information has been distributed to the Commission. Any questions? So we'll call on Mr. Solberg if there's any questions.
Mayor, I'll make the motion to approve the building permits.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Jurdevig. It's been moved and seconded to approve the building permits as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is the consent agenda, is to approve the following: the appointment of Megan Huffman to the West Fargo Planning and Zoning Commission.
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Thorstead. Is there a second, please?
I'll second.
Second, Commissioner Olson. It's been moved and seconded to accept the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to the regular agenda. First order of business is West Fargo Westfest recognition. Melissa Ritchie.
Good evening, Commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to publicly express gratitude to our staff and our community for the success of the 2018 Westfest. As you know, Westfest is an annual community celebration that brings together the residents of West Fargo to celebrate our community. I am pleased to inform you that not only did this year's celebration bring out residents from all areas of West Fargo, I'm pretty sure we had a few visitors from other cities, counties, and states as well. This year's event was also the first Westfest to take advantage of the city's new POWMA Plaza, which was a key location for a morning exercise class, a high school band jam, the NDSU Bison game, and the street dance later that night. But the highlights of this year's weekend for me was the amount of support and dedication that was offered to the team to pull these events off. And I'd like to take a few minutes to publicly thank those who contributed. First, I'd like to start by thanking the Tourism Events Committee for their continued commitment to Westfest. I'd like to thank the core Westfest staff, that was Ellen Rossau, Matthew Marshall, Callie Roth, and Stana Flom. They worked for months to plan the events and then execute them. I'd like to thank the Sanitation and the Public Works Department, who are key resources in not only the planning but the execution of these events. These departments spend countless hours ensuring the tools needed for the events are available and that our community is safe and clean before, during, and after the events. They also provided a high level of expertise during the planning stages. Thank you also to the police and fire departments who not only maintain safety during the events, but take the time to interact with the community. I think you all saw examples of that as well. They were also key experts during the planning of the events and constantly demonstrated their dedication to service of the community during them. A special thank you to the West Fargo Police Explorers, and I think we have a few in the audience tonight. These are an amazing group of young men and women who spent the day assisting with crowd control and keeping the event areas clean. The quality of service and hard work they provide at any event is always outstanding. There are also many generous sponsors whose financial support is vital to WestFest, and they include the platinum sponsors of FM Convention and Visitors Bureau, All Seasons Motorsports, Cascade Creamery, Costco, Doubletree by Hilton, FM Area Foundation, Engineering, West Fargo Pioneer, Sign Pro, VFW, Post 7564, Vistos Trailer Sales, WDAY Radio and TV, Moen Portable Toilets, which is a vital element to any event, and Titan Rentals. There are more sponsors who provided generously to us on the WestFest website if you'd like to check out those other organizations. I'd also like to thank the vendors and community partners who contributed to or executed events that offered a full weekend of fun for the community. Saturday was the big day. It was a day full of events, but there were also events Friday and Sunday. These partners include the West Fargo High School Marching Band and the Cheyenne High School Marching Band. They offered the first ever high school band jam-off on the street before the parade, and I think there were a lot of people who enjoyed that. Games galore, talent productions, nocturnal resources, Big Toe in the Jam, excellent band we all enjoyed, Fargo Fit Life, Soul Motion Races, Jennifer Edens, Bud Warren, Post-Traumatic Funk Syndrome, Classic Floral, Blessed Sacrament, Penny and Pals, our awesome food vendors who stuck with us the whole day, Top Dog Hot Dog, Bronson's Concessions, Uncle Sal's Italian Ice, the Pacatana's Dance Team and the Horace Dance Team, and the Red River Regional Marksmanship Center. And of course, we have to thank the over 100 parade participants who brought all the candy. I saw multiple children walking away with bags full halfway through the parade because there was a large supply of candy, which they enjoyed. A special thank you also to the businesses and residents that live in the downtown area who allow us to take over the area for the day. That's a big ask of them, and we're always thankful for their support. We had some amazing community volunteers who spent hours with us Saturday making the magic of WestFest happen. A thank you to Jay Thomas and Alex Taylor for the grandstand announcements, and Jay assistance in setting up and managing the parade throughout the day. We also had volunteers who assisted with the WestFest races, the parade and family fun. These include Paul Kalabapke and the Waste Management employees. Various community volunteers included Justin Richard, Preston Nichols, Carolyn Feichner, Gregory Wald, Travis Genty, Jen Rosso, Matt Welly, Dustin Scott, Pierre Freeman, Sherry Sinarski, and the Horace Dance Team, and Steve Fiskin. We also had a number of high school students who came out and volunteered, which I think was really special, and they included Addie Rosso, Julie Zamkulu, Lawson Kraft, Logan Lemke, and Amber Webb Brown. I'd like to also have a special thank you to Larry Lubin, who is here tonight. He is one of our community volunteers. He's probably well known to a lot of you. Larry has a long history and experience with WestFest, and he was invaluable during planning. His willingness to take care of many tasks during the weeks leading up to the WestFest and the day of were also very valuable. Finally, I'd like to thank you, commissioners. WestFest would not happen without your continued dedication and support of this event. We look forward to an even bigger, better 2019 WestFest, filled with the same amount of gratitude for our community's dedication to celebrating what makes West Fargo so special. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. And to all of those that are in the crowd this evening, thank you so very much for participating. It really sets West Fargo apart in this yearly fall celebration. Next order of business is item number 1 is the 5:30 public hearing for confirmation of assessment list. And with that, Mr. Shockley and Mrs. Fisk.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the West Fargo City Commission. Tonight we have on the agenda 3 hearings for the districts 1279, 458, and 460. The process in place is you will call to order the public hearing, allow comments, and then close the public hearing, deliberate, and possibly make a decision regarding the district. Specifically, I'll briefly describe what the project was, if there was any assessment objections raised at the Assessment Commission before you go into the hearing. Plus, I would intend that if there's any additional presentations regarding the engineering aspects of the project, probably have Dustin make a comment on that prior to the start of the hearing. The hearing tonight is not a court hearing, so the rule of evidence don't apply, but when people make their appeal, they should focus on their assessment and try to be relevant to what their proposed assessment is. The North Dakota Century Code provides that the Assessment Commission has made its decision, which is different than the Planning and Zoning. Planning and Zoning makes recommendations. The Assessment Commission makes its decision. People are authorized pursuant to the Century Code to file a written appeal of that decision. Technically, they will have had to have filed a written appeal to appear before you to argue the merits of their objection and their appeal. After the public hearing portion is closed, then the City Commission would make a decision. The City of West Fargo's practice has been, if there is somebody that has appeared before the Commission and has not filed a written appeal, that the Commission would still hear that, given that they've made the effort to show up at the meeting. I'll help you through the process. In one of the districts, we have a significant number of appeals, and I'll help you walk through that process as we go. And in that particular district, I'll be asking the Commission to wait until our next meeting in 2 weeks to make a final decision, as we have so many appeals to process that I need to respond to each appeal and bring that back to the Commission. With that said, our first district is district number 1279. That is for a street and sewer and water reconstruction of 12th Avenue Northeast. It was a very large project. The total project cost is about $20,996,000. There was a city and state contribution of just under $7 million. So the total amount assessed in that district was $14,165,000. At the Assessment Commission, we had one property owner who appeared that didn't necessarily have an objection to their assessment, but more had questions. They were a commercial property owner. I believe the city engineer met with that property owner and answered their questions. The Special Assessment Commission had tabled the decision on that district until it had a subsequent meeting after that property owner had met with the engineer. The property owner did not reappear before the Special Assessment Commission, and they confirmed the list as presented. Notice of the confirmation of that list appeared in the Fargo Forum, which is the official newspaper for West Fargo, on the 6th of September. So unless the engineer has any particular questions, you would need to open the public hearing for that district. If there's any comments or objections, hear them, close it, and make a decision. To the best of my knowledge, we have not received any written appeals for District 1279.
Thank you, Mr. Shockler. Public hearing for water, storm, street improvements for District 1279 are now open. Is there any public comment? Is there any public comment? Is there any public comment? Hearing no comments, public hearing for water, storm, and street improvements for District 1279 are closed.
So, given that there is no objections, we would be looking for a commission motion to approve the list as presented.
Commissioners?
I'll make a motion to approve that.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second? I'll second. Second by Commissioner Olson. Has been moved and seconded for district number 1279 for water, storm, and street improvements. Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Next order of business is Storm Improvement District number 4060. I have been advised by legal counsel, being that I live in this district, and I have engaged in the public comments at the Special Assessment District that our city attorney has asked that I recuse myself. So with that, I'm going to turn that over to Deputy Mayor Horsley.
John, could we do, I guess, Storm Improvement District 4058 first to get that out of the way in case any people are here that want to go? Or is there anybody here for that one?
We certainly could. We didn't receive any written protests in 4058, so I don't know if anybody's necessarily here for that one. It's up to the commission.
Is there anyone here to speak on 4058? One gentleman there.
We could certainly handle 4058 if you'd like. So, District 4058.
Can we get them out of the way, I guess? I'm sorry.
So, thank you, Commissioners. 4058 is a smaller improvement district that involved some drainage improvements within the Hayden Heights subdivision. About $165,000 of the improvement were assessed out. My understanding is there was actually higher city costs, but the city limited some of the costs that were assessed out. The assessments were for localized improvements. We had a significant number of people turn out at the Assessment Commission meeting. The city subsequently held meetings with some of the property owners that were able to attend, was able to answer some of their questions. This Special Assessment Commission did make some revisions to the assessment list based upon those discussions and confirmed the list as amended. The list was, in fact, or the notice of confirmation was published in the Fargo Forum. I don't know if the engineer has anything to add about 4058. Given that we haven't received a written appeal, I would ask that whoever is going to be presenting their appeal would note their name, their property, and if they have a proposed assessment and how much that is, just for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. We'll close the regular agenda and move into the public hearings for Storm Improvement District number 4058. Is there any public comment?
Thank you. My name is Austin Grubley. I live at 3773 14th Street West in Hayden Heights in West Fargo. My apologies about the appeal thing. We sent one prior to the Special Assessment Committee meeting. I thought that carried over to this one, but some of my assessments have been resolved to the, I guess, best it can be. One of which is still outstanding, and I have not received any word if it's changed or not. It's for a flared end on one of my culverts, which I dispute that it was ever changed. I've kind of just been given excuses as to why that's still there, and it's apparently it's a new one, even though I have photos showing it isn't. Several of my other neighbors who weren't able to attend tonight, they have outstanding issues that they just haven't had resolved, and it's been kind of a hectic ordeal. I guess, no real closure on it, and we'd like to, I guess, get some answers and figure something out before it's finalized.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Yes, thank you, Commission President Dardis and members of the Commission. Just to back up a little bit and explain the nature of the improvements are related to drainage ditches. This is a rural subdivision that relies on ditch to convey their runoff. The point in question that Austin brought up is regarding a culvert that was replaced underneath a driveway. The specific question was part of the assessments included this culvert being replaced. Mr. Rubley provided some pictures that alluded to the culvert was not replaced. However, in working back through with the engineer on the project along with the contractor, we were provided documentation that it in fact is a new culvert. It may or may not look brand new and shiny, but it is a new culvert. So I believe the value of that was about $300. I can't recall off the top of my head, but when we discussed this at the last Special Assessment Commission meeting, we did make several adjustments within other properties and specifically Mr. Grubely's property, but that particular one we did not substantiate, so we did not remove that from his assessment.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Sir, step back to the podium, please. Thank you.
Part of what Mr. Scott explained is correct, except the pictures I provided showed that it was not a new culvert, which Moore Engineering agreed that my culvert is not a new culvert. There was a clerical issue, 3737. They did receive a new culvert at 53 feet. I was assessed 53 feet of culvert at $45 per linear foot. Obviously 3737, 3773 could have just been a clerical issue. So that was resolved, and they did at first remove 46 feet of it, saying I did receive 9 feet. When I then provided pictures, Moore Engineering did then agree I didn't receive 9 feet, and my neighbor did not receive 46, he did receive a full 53. In the pictures also shows the flared end, which is not shiny and new. It looks exactly the same as the north end of my culvert, which had zero work done to it. That flared end looks the same as the south end. All the other flared ends in the neighborhood that have been replaced or added are nice, shiny, and new. I was given the excuse that possibly that flared end sat at True North steel for 3 years before being put on at my place, and that's why it's tarnished looking. I guess I just find that to be odd that that would be the case. So,
Dustin, please. Dustin, do we have documentation that that's a new culvert? Do we have paperwork that shows that?
Yes, yep, that's what we discussed at the Special Assessment Commission meeting, is that, again, the engineer in charge of the project in the field working with the contractor, they were able to substantiate that a culvert was brought out there. So
you have
what I'm relying upon is that the culvert, the $300 flared end section of that culvert, I should say, was put in, hence that assessment stayed on. The other issue with the 53 feet, that part was corrected. There was a transpo error of addresses, but that one was resolved, corrected. However, the few feet of culvert with that flared end section remained on that property's assessment.
So I don't think you quite answered it. Let me be more clear maybe. So do you have actual documentation, or do you have the developer just telling you that he replaced the flare? Do you have actual paperwork?
Yes, there is confirmation from the engineer and the contractor that they did deliver a new culvert. That was paid for to the contractor as well. So yes, I don't have it with me here, but it is documented.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Is there any other public comment? Is there any other public comment? Is there any other public comment? Yes, ma'am.
The few times that I have been at these meetings, there have been several different issues where people have come up and have noted that Moore Engineering was overseeing this job and it didn't get done. I'm wondering how often this is coming up, because I've only been here a few times, and every time I've been here, there's been issues like that. Is there someone who from Moore Engineering that's supervising these people that they have do these jobs?
Ma'am, we need your name and address.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Kathy Neugebauer, West Fargo.
Mr. Scott, respond.
Well, specifically, yes, there is a structure, if you will, an organizational structure of management that, at the end of the day, ultimately will reflect back to me as the city engineer being responsible for the execution of design and construction administration. So I guess if there's a specific issue, I would be the one that would take responsibility. And beyond me, then it goes to upper management and ultimately the president.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Is there any other public comment on district number 4058? Being none, the public hearing is closed.
I guess other than showing that gentleman, if he hasn't seen it yet, Dustin, the paperwork, the actual documentation, if he hasn't seen it yet, I would suggest sending that to him. Other than that, I don't know what else we could tell you other than we're saying that it was replaced.
And I understand that. It's just been frustrating when I'm told that a engineer for the company approved something, and then more has agreed that there was an issue. Then you approved other part of it, and then that's been resolved, and more acknowledges there was a mistake. And then again, that same engineer, it's their word against mine, and basically.
Why don't you stand up for a moment, just so, I'm sorry, but it's not just the engineer's word, it's the developer and the builder. And, I mean, so it's not just their word. If they have documentation, they have documentation. So a lot of times, culverts and all pipes sit outside forever before you. Batteries sit outside. When you go and think you get a brand new battery, they pull it out of the back from a pallet that sat all winter. I mean, so it's hard to tell.
And I understand that. It's just, I guess at this point, it just seems like there's, throughout this whole process, we've raised issues that have been disputed, and later on, I guess you want to say we were right. It turned out to be right. My driveway was slated to be cut out and a whole culvert replaced, and I informed them that that does not need to happen. You can do an easier route. I went round and round with multiple phone calls. That was then finally, they decided to try what I was saying, did it, and it worked. Several other neighbors have had similar situations, and I mean, I guess to me, I understand there's documentation, and it's just
frustrating.
It is, especially when, like I said, I have photos that I can show you what an old culvert flared end looks like and what my new one looks like, and they look identical, yet all the other new ones are new. And it's just, there's constantly opinions and excuses as to why I'm wrong that are hypotheticals, I guess, in my opinion, that to me is no more valuable than what I'm saying. And just because, I mean, I get that there's documentation from an engineer saying something happened. I still don't think that was necessarily correct. I think there was just it's a small project. I understand there was other things going on at the same time. 32nd and 40th Avenue were being redone. Speaking of which, we still can't even access 32nd without going around a road closed sign. And we were assessed specials for 32nd to be redone because that'll benefit us. And since thaw of this year, there's been a road closed sign up to this day. And I get it, we're a small community, or a small group of people out there, not top of West Fargo's priorities for...
that doesn't matter. You're a part of West Fargo.
Yeah.
And believe me, we all care about you as much as we do anybody else. I mean,
right. I mean, I understand there's
you're our citizens. So.
Much bigger projects going on, and time needs to be dedicated to that, but it's just been a frustrating experience for us.
Is there a reason, Dustin? I'm sorry, Mayor, to take the time up. Is there a reason why the road isn't open yet? Where he's referring to?
Where are you referring to?
The minimum maintenance, what would be 15th Avenue? The gravel road.
The minimum maintenance road you're referring to?
The part of it that's minimum maintenance, the 3/4 of a mile or so, that leads up to 32nd Avenue. That's had road closed signs on the north end of that and the south end, just on the north side of our development, since thaw of this spring until today. And I understand the reason why, because people were taking front-wheel drive cars down a minimum maintenance road thinking they could make it, and there was, I think in a week, 4 times a tow truck out there pulling someone out. So I understood the reason for putting them up, but they're still there. And, I mean, technically we can't access it because that would be breaking the law going around a road closed sign.
That's something our public director, works director will talk about, I guess, here.
Oh, exactly correct. I mean, those have been up there. It's more of a dirt road, and the wet spring and the continued trucks getting stuck out there, and the wet fall we're having now too. We haven't had the opportunity to actually go out there and blade that. So
is that Chris? I drove that one. Is that what we're talking about?
That's just directly north out of there.
We were actually asked to put up signs out there, I believe.
Yep.
So that was something that your residents asked for out in that area.
Oh.
So,
But, I mean, he is correct.
Yeah.
They're up, it's a minimum maintenance road, and basically this year's been a no maintenance road because it's been too wet to do anything with. But
And
we're
they
just
didn't
waiting
want
for
it
things
tore
to
up
firm
either,
up,
so.
and we're gonna blade it and make it usable for you.
okay, good.
Thank you, Austin, for participating this evening. I'll drive it tomorrow. Thank you.
I would invite it.
I got a new four-wheel drive.
Don't drag the mud onto our.
See, that's why we closed, that's exactly why we closed it.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that.
Firm Improvement District number 4058 is closed. Commissioners?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Thank you, Commissioner Thorstad. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is Historic Improvement District number 4060.
I have a question too, before we get started, because I live in that district too, so I need to.
No, as the mayor and I had discussed, being a property owner within a district does not necessarily cause you to have a conflict of interest. It's if you participate within the hearings before the special assessment, because this is treated as a quasi-judicial action, and as you as decision makers are supposed to be viewed as impartial. So you hear the appeals, listen to the facts, listen to the law, and try to make an impartial decision. And the courts want you as decision makers to sit as kind of a quasi-judge and make sure that you're carefully listening to the evidence. And to that, we have a large number of appeals tonight. And so from a process standpoint, we'll have the city administrator call out the person's name that filed the appeal. They should present evidence regarding whatever evidence they have, whatever arguments they might have regarding the issue to you. They should explain what the property they have, what the proposed assessment is, and whatever other issues that are relevant to the assessment. Also, the Special Assessment Commission had met regarding this project early on, and had initially considered assessing a higher amount for the localized assessment. The localized assessment is where the basis of most of the objections for the appeals are. The district consists of both a localized assessment and a regional assessment. The regional assessment is based upon an equivalent unit that is assigned to a household or a lot on the basis of an equivalent unit. The localized assessment is based upon square foot. As we've discussed in previous meetings, storm sewer for localized benefit is typically charged on a square footage basis. The one recommendation that I have regarding this district, as will the engineer, there is a subdivision that is South Rivers Estates that is currently unplatted. During the assessment process, they were treated as unplatted property and therefore got a higher number of equivalent units assigned to their parcels. We had an opportunity to meet with the representatives of that subdivision. They have since submitted in writing an application and a petition that they will go ahead and subdivide that property. So my recommendation for those properties is to treat them as if they were platted. That will result in a small reduction in their assessments. Some of them also have appeals, and so that would be part of my recommendation ultimately regarding the decision in their appeal. Regarding this Commission's decisions, given the large number of appeals and all the issues that are being raised, my recommendation tonight would be to listen to the appeals. Then I will begin drafting the response based upon any input that the Commission gives tonight. And then I would ask that in 2 weeks, we're going to be asking for a special Commission meeting to have approve the rest of the assessment districts, that you would then make your final decision that night. That night would not be a public hearing as it is tonight, but tonight the purpose would be to take any evidence or testimony that you receive from the appellants. Finally, if you have any questions for them when they're speaking, go ahead and ask. Once again, when a judge is reviewing this, they give great deference to you as decision makers, but with that great deference, the judge does expect that impartiality and that you'll listen to the arguments that are made. And so I can certainly answer any questions that you might have. It is a district that's involved, or that the basis of it was improvements to a storm lift station. I think the city engineer has kind of a significant report on what was actually done out there. Because of the large number of objections and appeals, we thought it would be appropriate to just go over the basics of the district so that you had some information, and then hear the appeals, ask questions, close the hearing, and then if there's some comments or something that you're thinking like, yes, we agree with your recommendation regarding changing the platted or the unplatted parcels to be treated as platted parcels, I'll incorporate that with the final decision. And so, Dustin, do you have anything to add?
Commissioner Thorstad, first, can I ask? John, first, to make it very clear, we're not voting on this tonight if you didn't hear him, so you know for sure. Second, can we put any conditions on this meeting, on this public hearing, such as time limits and making sure they're to the point and not repeating things over and over again so we're not here all night?
Well, the chair of the meeting has that discretion that the comments should be germane. They should be related to the assessment. I would suggest a little bit longer time limit than your normal 3-minute time limit, maybe a 5 or 6 minute, but as the chair can certainly say, it's, you know, time to move forward with the argument. It needs to be relevant and germane. The person can simply say, I've submitted my written objection. They don't need to speak. We have the written objection if they don't want to speak, but we're going to call their name and they'll provide their testimony to you.
Yeah, I think the way John's outlined it is the way we'll proceed, and then after Tina's gone through the list, we'll also allow anyone else that wishes to speak, but, excuse me, but yes, if people would, you know, to reiterate what John says, when the opportunity comes to speak, if you'd be on spot on this particular district, as you know, we can certainly talk all night about the processes and everything else, and I think Commissioner Jurdovic has proposed and the commission has accepted that we're going to have public meetings regarding special assessments and how they're determined and the whole process in the very near future, so we don't want to get into that discussion tonight. So if you will, when the public hearing part is opened, come to the podium, state your name after Tina's called your name for list and your address, or clerk can record it. But at this time, I guess we'll turn over to Dustin to give us a brief presentation.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thorstad and members of the Commission. I apologize to the public. I'm going to be facing the Commission, but if any time we want to ask questions, I guess I'll leave that up to the Commission to stop me, and we'll work through them. Like John said, you know, we wanted to give a brief summary on what the nature of the improvements are, how we arrived at where we are today. I believe the Commission has received other information from either myself, John, or Tina. This is kind of a supplement to those reports. I will try to be brief, but hopefully thorough enough to where we can understand enough to move forward. So with that, so the focus points I'm going to touch on with this presentation, and let me back up here. I'm going to go through the background of the project, give a brief summary of the design, talk about the assessment process, go over previous projects of a similar nature, review some of the comments and protests that we have received and how we've responded to them, and then touch on the proposed revisions for you to consider tonight. So, as John mentioned, it's a stormwater system improvement. Stormwater systems can be, in general, summarized as conveyance, which include pipes, culverts, ditches, retention pond, which is where we store excess volume of runoff, and then, of course, a pumping station, which at that point controls the release of that runoff back into downstream systems. In our case, it's the Cheyenne River with this particular project. Purpose and need of stormwater systems, and to control stormwater runoff for the City of West Fargo's policies and regulations. And with this particular system, we're dealing with runoff from not only Cheyenne Street expansion, but of course 40th Avenue expanded recently. So we have arterial streets there that have additional runoff that we are accommodating. And along with that, we have drainage that enters into the Cheyenne Street system from nearby neighborhoods. So the design areas, I'm going to pull out a little laser pointer here. So the design areas, as I mentioned, we got Cheyenne Street, roughly from 36th Avenue down to 52nd Avenue, and then 40th Avenue West. So those are the arterial streets that, you know, within their right-of-way, produce their own runoff and is needing to be collected, stored, and controlled through a lift station. And that is the basis of our regional assessment. So when we talked about, or when John mentioned that there are regional assessments and localized assessments, the amount of runoff that we are intercepting from these streets is what we are describing as a regional assessment or regional benefit. That benefit extends to everybody, every parcel within this red boundary. This red boundary is the limits of the assessment district itself. So the legal description of that assessment district would follow that particular boundary. The localized improvements, it's kind of hard to see on the screen, but we have these neighborhoods here that are shaded in green that drain to Cheyenne Street. That is a separate component of this particular district that we are treating as local benefit, so that properties outside of those areas are not receiving that additional cost. That cost is being incurred upon those specific neighborhoods. The regional benefit is assessed on an equivalent unit basis. The local assessment is based on a square foot basis. So how did we analyze this system? How did we get to understanding what needs to be in the ground for collection pipes, retention ponds, and ultimately, in this particular case, this lift station? We started with a hydraulic model and a report that was prepared by Moore Engineering. And what you're seeing in this particular graphic is one of the many exhibits that are included in this particular report. Again, the attributing flows are the roadway corridors and the neighborhoods that are draining into Cheyenne Street. One point I want to make clear is that those neighborhoods are draining into Cheyenne Street today, and the design is based on those drainage conditions as it is today. So it's not based on future improvement projects within those local neighborhoods. It is based on those neighborhoods producing a runoff value that enters into this system, albeit it is certainly different than an urbanized neighborhood that sheds water quicker, but the nature of those storm lift stations and systems are designed to handle that, whereas this particular system is designed to handle the rural runoff from these neighborhoods and again, the regional corridors. That particular report is a requirement of the funding for the Cheyenne Street reconstruction, so it was submitted to DOT, reviewed and approved. And again, this is just another graphic. It's hard to see here, but what I'm trying to show is that for each little pocket area, there's...
Dustin?
Yep.
I'm sorry, can we interrupt you as you're speaking? So when you say it's approved by North Dakota DOT, do they take a look at any of this stuff to see what you're presenting right now? Do they agree with what we're doing, or do they look at with what we're doing, or what?
Their review is a little more specific to the conveyance and collection system that is going to be installed with Cheyenne Street. But yes, they look at the entire model as a whole. So you have to demonstrate where the retention is located and where the lift station is located and how it is discharging, how it is controlling the runoff, ultimately that the systems are sized appropriately and in accordance to their requirements, as well as the city's specific requirements. So yes. But again, their review is a little more specific to the Cheyenne Street components.
Right.
So, but in that particular report, we do indicate that there are other watersheds draining to Cheyenne Street, i.e. these particular neighborhoods. So yes, they would have seen all of this information.
And would they have looked at the possibility of saying, you know, you're totally wrong, those homes aren't draining here, or would they even?
Yes, they would confirm that the flows that we are accounting
so
for
concurring with
are correct.
what you're saying is where I'm getting with this.
Yes.
It's just more engineering, or city engineering saying that this is
correct. Yep, correct statement.
I didn't know that before, so.
So, once the engineer prepares this particular hydraulic model, one request I had was identify the total flow and then separate that out into what percent of flow is accounted for within Cheyenne Street and 40th Avenue corridors versus what is the percent of flow that we are designing for that is coming from these neighborhoods. As you can see, the response here is 64% of the design flow is attributed to these subdivisions draining to Cheyenne Street. This is based on the 5-year event. And 36% is from the Cheyenne Street and 40th Avenue corridors. So again, what that kind of starts to demonstrate is the benefit. That is demonstrating that there is a regional benefit and a local benefit. And if we would look at the total project cost, a direct relation would be apply 36% of that cost to the regional areas and apply the 64% to the neighborhoods. Just some more excerpts from the hydraulic report. Again, just showing some rainfall data that's used. They follow not only the North Dakota DOT policies, procedures, but they also use what's called an InfoSwim model that uses the SCS and TR55 report numbers. And I'm going to say that a little bit probably wrong, but point I'm trying to make here is that it's a pretty sophisticated model. It's not just a table that sits, you know, within the city somewhere that we apply without any discretion or further analysis. And off to the right are a few of the LiDAR imaging maps that are also included in the report. What this is showing is the elevation or topography of the system that's being analyzed. The red is higher ground, the green is low ground. So what this is somewhat demonstrating here is obviously the houses are up higher, and as you get to Cheyenne Street, you can see here where the Cheyenne Street ditch is the low ground. So again, not to scrutinize or get into this specific detail, it's just an idea of what is included when we go through and analyze and design for a particular stormwater system. Today, what is out there and in place is a culvert. This is 40th Avenue and Cheyenne Street intersection. This culvert is showing, it's at the southeast quadrant of that intersection. This is where ultimately on the east side of Cheyenne, that ditch flow is entering this particular culvert today, coming north of 40th Avenue, and then back west of Cheyenne Street, and then back down again south of 40th Avenue, and ultimately coming into a new storm drain system that was in place after the 40th Avenue West project that conveys that water to the new retention pond that is just kind of kitty corner southeast of the water tower. What will happen next year with Phase 3 of Cheyenne Street as we reconstruct Cheyenne Street from 32nd to roughly 1,500 feet south of 40th Avenue, there will be a new storm drain system installed under Cheyenne Street, and along with that, we'll be putting in ditch culverts or ditch inlets that will improve the ability to take the water from Cheyenne Street's ditch versus what is in place today of this 18-inch culvert.
Dustin?
Yes, sir.
You don't mind me jumping in like this, right? So when the water goes, I'm assuming you're saying it comes off the land, it goes to that culvert. Where does it go from that culvert? Does it go across Cheyenne to the west, and where does it go?
So I'm going to run through that with this. Follow the green dot up there. So it enters this culvert here, goes north of 40th Avenue, then west across Cheyenne Street, back across 40th Avenue again. So it kind of does a roundabout way to get into this southwest quadrant here. And in 2016, when we reconstructed 40th Avenue, there is a new storm sewer system that takes this water now to the retention pond that was put in just south of the water tower out there. This particular pond will be expanded again with the Cheyenne Street project next year, but today there is roughly 2/3 of that pond in place. So yeah, ultimately that ditch water goes across 40th, across Cheyenne Street, and then back across 40th again, ultimately getting back into the pond.
Goes south?
Yes. So it goes north across 40th, west across Cheyenne, south and back across 40th. Ideally, we would have just had a culvert crossing right here that goes east to west.
Right.
But that wasn't the case back then. Yep, it's been that way for some time. And again, that will be modified now when Cheyenne Street's reconstructed next year. This will be a new storm system. So now the flow will actually be intercepted here, taken down through a main line, and enter the newly expanded pond at this particular location here.
And right now it's just following the ditch line, you mean, to get down?
So right now, it again follows the ditch line, comes all the way up, crosses 40th, crosses Cheyenne, comes back across 40th, and then comes actually in through here, and then enters on the west side of the pond. That'll be intercepted, and it'll be taken directly to the pond here.
Okay.
Actually, at the request of Commissioner Simmons, last week we had some unfortunate snowfall, but along with that we also had some rains, and so Commissioner Simmons asked that I go out there and take some pictures and basically just demonstrate that there's water entering in the ditch on Cheyenne Street, and like shown here before, it is ultimately coming up through this intersection down around back to this pond, which is feeding this particular lift station that we put in, which is District 4060, and then being pumped into the river. So again, just demonstrating that there's water there. Now this is, I have no idea how much rainfall we got. I don't know if it was a 1-year event, a 2-week event, or a 10-year event. I didn't look up to see how relevant these pictures are to the particular conversation, but the point of the matter was, you know, water is flowing in the ditch. It's coming from somewhere. It's coming from these neighborhoods. So now, getting to the assessment process. As John alluded to, the Special Assessment Commission has met twice. They are responsible for establishing the benefit and allocating the assessments in accordance with the City of West Fargo policies and adhering to the state law. They did consider options based on area, flow rates, historical averages, and various degrees of capping the local assessment. But focusing on the design flow, back to that percent split of how much flow is entering into the system, When we looked at that, the regional, that 36%, that would have generated an equivalent unit cost of $253. The local assessment would have been 30 cents a square foot. And as you know, the Assessment Commission voted to cap the local assessments at 10 cents a square foot, which caused an increase, 136% increase in the equivalent unit number, and a 66% decrease in the local assessment.
What do you mean, Dustin, by the 136% increase in the regional? Who's paying for that extra? The rest of the district, right? The rest of the area?
Yes. So back to this particular map, everybody within this red boundary, including the green shaded parcels, every parcel within this red boundary is being assessed on an equivalent unit basis, that number. Now, typical residential lots are going to get one equivalent unit. Larger lots that are, say, apartment complexes or commercial lots, they're going to have more equivalent units. Generally, an equivalent unit is calculated as 10,000 square feet is equal to one equivalent unit. However, we do have a policy in place that if you're a platted neighborhood and developed, you will, if you're over 2 acres and platted, you will not be given more than one equivalent unit for the first 2 acres, and then one subsequent unit for each acre after that. So, for example, if you're a 5-acre parcel, you would receive 4 equivalent units. If you're a 30-acre apartment complex site, you would have received roughly 30 times 4.5, so 140 equivalent units.
Okay, and I don't see it in here, so well, why did the assessment committee then decide to go from 30 cents down to 10 cents? What was their reasoning? I mean, was there a difference? They just felt it was more fair, or what was the actual reason they gave?
The general discussion was that these neighborhoods, albeit they certainly are draining to the system, they are still, the perception in these neighborhoods is that they don't have good drainage. You know, they rely on ditches. They aren't receiving, for the most part, they don't have city services at this point. They don't have sewer, water. So I think based on just partial discretion and partial sympathy to minimize the burden, they decided to bring it down to that 10 cents cap.
Okay.
And I don't know, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if there's anything in writing that is documented on how they made that decision, but in general, that's my recollection of the conversation.
Well, the Special Assessment Commission did approve some findings, and echoing what Dustin has expressed, that there was a general consensus that the neighborhoods were not fully urbanized like some of our other urban sections, and so the Special Assessment Commission looked at that. They also looked at how we treat completely unplatted, undeveloped property, where we'll apply a factor to reduce the area that's assessed. And so they really tried to take into account that these neighborhoods are a little bit different than some of the other urbanized neighborhoods. So they were trying to make an effort to do their job. They have a tough job, and they looked at it and said that 10 cents seemed like the right amount to apply, and it was less than the amount that they determined to be benefited. So they felt that 10 cents was per square foot was an appropriate assessment.
So again, they met on the 21st with no action. They approved the list that's before you today on September 6th. And of course, today we're having the final public hearing and going to be discussing a potential revision. If approved tonight, the intent is to certify these assessments in November with the county, which then would reciprocate into a first payment on this 25-year assessment would be due in 2019 with your 2019 tax statement. So getting to the previous projects, these are other developments. Of course, these are for the most part urban developments, but the projects that I am comparing here are specifically for a stormwater pumping station. This does not include any of the conveyance, the localized conveyance systems, or even the regional ponds that were constructed. So comparing other districts that had a pumping station, we have a neighborhood here which is just southwest of Costco. It's called the Preserve. The cost on a square foot basis was 28 cents per square foot, which was assessed to all the properties in this particular red boundary. And to the south of that in Shadowwood, again, a storm lift station there was put in 2011 and again cost 28 cents a square foot. On the left side here is an area called Brooks Harbor. To the south here is Eaglewood. And up north here is Highland Meadows, which is currently being developed. In 2011, we put in a lift station that served a half section here. You can see here some economies of scale or efficiencies of a lift station serving a smaller area generated or yielded a higher cost per square foot. So in that particular neighborhood, they paid 49 cents per square foot for that pumping station, and to the north was even more costly in that they paid 53 cents per square foot for a pumping station. On the right side of the screen here, south of Eagle Run, this is a community known as Westport Beach and the Wilds. This lift station was put in 2004 and was assessed out at 40 cents per square foot. The reason I am not focusing on Eagle Run is that Eagle Run was developed a little bit differently in that for that section of land there are multiple stormwater pumping stations. So there's smaller pumping stations that serve a few blocks at a time that ultimately send the water to a large pumping station, but that one I felt was not a relative comparison in that we have multiple stations serving a section of land, so I didn't want to total up a cost and get to over $1 a square foot, but I'm guessing that's in the neighborhood of where it would shake out. Any questions on the previous cost before I move on? Okay. Getting on to some of the comments and protests that we've received in the last month and a half. I think one of the bigger ones have been, water does not leave our neighborhood. By the time it even gets away from my house, it's absorbed into the ground, it's evaporated, it disappears. Whatever the point they're trying to make is that it ultimately does not go into this system, hence they're not receiving a benefit. So one way I'd like to look at that is if Cheyenne Street was converted into something else, maybe a levee, maybe a flood wall, but ultimately if the ditches were eliminated and there were no culverts or drains in place to collect the runoff or drainage from those neighborhoods, eventually localized flooding would occur under typical weather patterns. Of course, if there's a drought, there's a drought, but point there is that those neighborhoods are not draining into, say, the river as a neighborhood as a whole. It is coming to Cheyenne Street. Consequences if we put up a ditch block of some sort and did not allow their runoff to enter into our system, of course, we're going to have that localized flooding, which is going to have access limitations for residents as well as emergency services, potential water damage to homes or other structures, health risks with stagnant water, and ultimately, pavement deterioration, among other things. In order to address those, each of these neighborhoods would have to start putting in their own pumping stations as well as retention ponds, but eventually they would have the need to go out and put in their own stormwater system, which would be likely a costly endeavor. And more importantly, I don't know exactly where they could start to fit in some of those components. One of the other comments has been this is a future benefit. And like I alluded to when we were going over the design summary, is that this particular system is designed based on the current drainage conditions, as well as accommodating the upsized storm drains underneath Cheyenne Street that'll be coming with additional ditch inlets as Cheyenne Street is reconstructed. So we are being assessed a local benefit. Will the drainage in front of our house improve? The answer to that is no. The function of this particular storm system is to collect and control runoff from multiple contributing sources, and in this particular case, it's the arterial streets and these neighborhoods collectively. The previous district that we just talked through, District 4058, that's an example of a local improvement drainage project that was done in front of homes to improve the drainage in front of those areas, and it was financed specifically within that neighborhood. Another common question has been Nelson Acres. Why is Nelson Acres not included? I'm going to skip back to get to a map to just point out where Nelson Acres is. Nelson Acres is on the corner of 40th Avenue and Cheyenne Street, roughly 150 acres of rural development out there comprised of 4, 5, 6 acre lots. The difference with Nelson Acres is that it does have a high probability of redeveloping. In fact, in the last year or two, I've seen a couple applications coming forward and or proposals to start splitting up a 5 acre parcel and adding to it, which redevelopment would significantly change the drainage patterns as well as the amount of runoff that is sent to a system. So we are establishing a point that Nelson Acres in the future will have to put in their own stormwater system and will finance it accordingly.
Excuse me, Dustin, but Nelson Acres is in the regional, correct? But are you talking local?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Thorstad. So they are still within the red boundary, so they are still receiving an equivalent unit. And so in the case of Nelson Acres, if you have a 5 acre parcel, which most of them are anywhere from 4 to 6 acres, they're getting as many equivalent units minus 1. So if you have a 6 acre parcel, you're getting a 5 equivalent unit. So we had, based on some of the past projects that I went through, pumping station guesstimating 40 cents to 60 cents a square foot. Our retention ponds over the last 5 years have ranged from 10 cents to 20 cents per square foot. But again, they could see higher costs depending on how they develop, where they can fit certain infrastructure in. But again, we're keeping that separate, and they will not receive a local benefit for this. Their drainage today ultimately does come through up north to 40th Avenue. It is controlled by a culvert there, and based on the hydraulic model and report, the amount of flow or runoff that runs through that culvert and ultimately to the lift station equates to about 2.1% of the total flow. So it's a relatively small number to begin with, but as discussed with the Special Assessment Commission when deciding on appropriating benefit, the decision was to leave that 2% out and again focus on the fact that they will put in their own infrastructure in the future.
Dustin, when that future comes for them, you're saying that that total cost will go just to the Nelson Acres? It won't be assessed to anybody else?
Correct. There's always an opportunity when we, you know, it's not to say never, because we might end up taking the opportunity to fix a ditch over on, it could be on 15th Street West. You know, the minimum maintenance road might end up being a part of something. So I won't say within 100% guarantee, but yes, for the most part, a specific retention pond and lift station that is put into service, that 150 acres, will be financed within that 150 acres. So unless something else is included in that particular project, it'll stay 100% local. So the proposed revision, as John mentioned earlier, the Salt River Estates neighborhood has filed a petition to begin the platting process. So at this point, staff is going to recommend treating this neighborhood as platted parcels, which comes with a net change for these lots anywhere from $900 to looks like $1,500. So overall, with these 9 parcels, that equates to about $11,000 of decrease, and that cost now is being reciprocated back through the regional portion. So the impact to the regional assessment is going to change that from what you see currently at $597 and increase it to $601. So that concludes the presentation. At this point, I'll either answer more questions from the commission, or I'll take a seat and let you open up the public hearing.
Are there any questions, commissioners? Me? Okay, thank you, Dustin. I would assume, again, we're going to be talking about this assessment district and the protests specifically, but if you want a copy of the report he presented, if you don't have it, I'm sure it's available through the city, and they'll provide it to you. So, any other comments from the staff before we move on?
I just wanted to take a moment and remind everybody that the total amount that is listed in the amount proposed to be assessed, that is the total principal amount that's divided up over 25 years. That's not payable per year. And so if somebody's receiving an $8,000 assessment, that's divided over 25 years. Just for public information, sometimes people will be confused that they thinking that that's the amount of assessment per year. It's actually split up over 25 years with interest. The property owner always has the opportunity to prepay that and not pay the interest.
Okay, any additional comments before we open up to the public comment? Again, we're going to start the open phase. Tina will read off names of those that have presented protests or comments, and you don't have to speak, but if you'd like, you may. And again, if you'd please keep your comments concise and to the point, because we do have several people, and I think several people want to talk. So I'll close the portion of the hearing and then open it to the public, and I'll ask Tina to please read off the names. And again, when you come up, please give your name and address, or clerk can get that into the record as well. Thank you.
Okay. First on the list is Dennis Bollinger. Okay. Alan and Judy Duggan. Are you here? Okay. And I know Ed Eisenbeis is not. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm Judy Dudgeon. I live at 110 48th Avenue East in West Fargo. My husband and I submitted our letter of protest. We certainly don't mind paying assessments that we feel are fair and equitable, but we just don't feel that this is has not been a benefit to us and will not be a benefit in the future, and we just ask that the assessment be fair and that we be looked at more closely the same way that Nelson Acres is being looked at. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, sorry about that. The next one on the list is Ed Eisenbeis, and I believe I was told this morning that he is out of town. unless there's someone else here. No? Okay. Tony and Doreen Hamilton. Paul and Jane Holland. Okay. Richard and Carol Lewis.
Hi, I'm Carol Lewis, 103 48th Avenue East. I'm happy to hear that you guys are going to start holding some public informational meetings. That was unfortunate that one wasn't held in this case. I just feel that that would have been the least that could have been done for the taxpayers in this district. Most of us question why a project of this size was put in before plans are in place for the next phase of Cheyenne Street. We definitely don't benefit from the project now, as our drainage is actually blocked by the driveway into that lift station. We may never realize the benefit from the project since there are no plans in place for the next phase of Cheyenne Street, so I guess it's kind of a question how that lift station could be designed without knowing what the next phase is going to be.
I'm sorry, what's your address again?
103 48th Avenue East in McMahon Estates. Property owners in McMahon Estates have already paid for stormwater drainage when that development was constructed. We don't feel that we should be responsible for the cost of any alterations to the existing drainage as a result of the new development in the area. Again, we receive no benefit from this project and have no guarantee that we will in the future. At a special assessment committee meeting, a lot of us were in attendance, as you know. It was pointed out that Nelson Acres, where the lots are larger, which Dustin addressed, would be assessed at a lower rate and would receive an increased assessment at such time those property owners decide to redevelop. We respectfully request McMahon Estates be treated the same way. We have a little bit larger lots, not as large as Nelson Acres, but we just feel that should the time come we ever do want to redevelop, that we should be handled the same way. We believe the facts show that this is the right thing to do, and we really appreciate the time and consideration of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Patrick and Sherry McFerrin. Lynn Mitzel. Greg Mund. Curtis O'Lean.
I live at 4708 McMahon Estates Court. Been there since '97. Contrary to the models, very little water leaves my yard and exits onto Cheyenne. I mean, I understand you have models, but reality is, it just doesn't happen. Water does reach Cheyenne, as Carol indicated, cannot proceed north because it is blocked, pure and simple. And there's not a plan in place to fix it, nor is there a plan in place that I'm aware of to reconstruct Cheyenne south of 40th. McMahon Estates would like to be considered the same as Nelson, and to assume that Nelson Acres someday may redevelop, we can assume all kinds of things. But if we're dealing with facts and stuff in place, I think we need to go with that versus make an assumption based on a proposal to redesign one lot to omit the whole 150 acres. That's a stretch. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, can I ask a question?
Yeah, you may.
Actually, it's for Dustin. Dustin, that's two people that have come up now and said that it's blocked. Where's it blocked at? What am I missing?
Yep, the driveway that was put in with the lift station, which is on the south side of the lift station, the driveway was put in. The plans had intended there to be a culvert underneath that particular driveway. However, during construction, there was a decision made in the field to not put that culvert in due to the impacts it would have on the 16-inch water main that's underneath. The expense, I believe, to deepen that water main was about $25,000, and so there was a decision made in the field to not do that and simply lower the driveway to an elevation that requires that particular ditch, and this is on the west side of Cheyenne, but that particular ditch now would have to have about 2 feet of water in it, and it would flow over the driveway. There is a plan. There is a plan in place now that will go back and install that culvert, but it's going to require the expenditure of deepening that water main. But that will be done now when Cheyenne Street is reconstructed. And again, the limits of that next year's construction project is about not quite a quarter mile, but roughly 1,000 feet south of 40th Avenue is where the improvements extend to.
So in the meantime, where is that water going?
When it hits that particular driveway, it'll back up and into the Wilds storm system. But like I said, in the event that the water becomes high enough, it can go over the driveway and then into the lift station. So next year when we are out there again with Cheyenne Street, the culvert will be bored underneath that driveway.
So as of now, are they accurate in saying that they're getting no benefit then?
I would look at it as the point I made before. If we were to go back to each one of these intersections and put let's call it a ditch block, and not allow water to leave their development in time, that water will rise and localized flooding will occur. So the fact of the matter is their neighborhoods drain into Cheyenne Street. Everybody on the east side ultimately drains on the east ditch. Now there is a point where it crosses over to the west. Once it crosses over to the west, it heads north and then ultimately gets to this particular driveway. At that time, that water is now going through a different system. So to say that it goes nowhere is inaccurate, and to say they have zero benefit in this particular system, because of that driveway, it takes a certain level of water now to go over that driveway, but it still is going into a system that is part of the city of West Fargo. But like I said, that culvert will be put in next year, and ultimately their drainage will go immediately to that lift station. But I go back and focus on if we put a ditch block at each one of these intersections, we will see that their water starts to pool and ultimately causes local flooding issues. I think one of the perceptions out there is that since they are wide, big green spaces and relying on ditches that are relatively flat, the water that does dissipate out of that neighborhood is difficult to see and compare. It's not like you get an average rainfall and you got a foot of water in a ditch. That's not happening. So I understand that the appearance is saying we don't drain, we don't come to Cheyenne Street, the water doesn't go anywhere. But again, if we were to go back and block those intersections, that water will start to pool up because it has nowhere else to go. So, but to the point of the culvert underneath that particular driveway, yes, there was a culvert planned, was not installed during construction. It will be installed next year when Cheyenne Street is constructed past 40th.
Any additional comments? Sir, we're going to continue with where we're at, and you can make your public comments near the end here if you'd like. If you want to ask them a question at that time, so.
Keith and Connie Renus. Stephen and Heather Sand. James Schmidt. Christine and James Schreier.
Jim Schreier. My address is 127 48th Avenue East in West Fargo. I think you wanted to know what the assessed value was, I believe. 5442, I believe. 5442. I guess I've been to all three of the meetings. I've listened to him explain water and what he does with it, what we need to do with it. The third thing I have not heard ever is where my water goes, and I can tell you because I've lived at this residence since 1998. I moved in January, and I can tell you that my water does flow out onto the Cheyenne corridor. It goes up and it crosses, when you go up to South River Estates, it crosses their driveway, goes to the north of their driveway, it crosses back across Cheyenne. At that time, since the day I moved in there until they built the new pumping station, the water would run all the way to the north and hit 40th Avenue. Now, before West Fargo ever developed that area, my water used to run along that dirt road all the way out to the Cheyenne diversion, which I helped pay for to make this into the city. It ran into that diversion, except in a time if we ever had an enormous amount of flooding to where this land could not drain itself. There's a PTO pump that could be used to lift the water up and put it in the diversion, okay? So at the time when I purchased my land and built the house and the development was made, drainage was in place. As time went along, 40th Avenue became a street. Concrete streets. Concrete streets don't drain water. They have to get rid of water. It's a pathway for water. At that time, 40th Avenue became concrete, and a culvert was put in underneath it, and it still goes to the diversion. That is where that water goes to. That's where my water goes to. Up to that corner, into that drain, out there it goes. When the pumping station was being put in, I brought it to the attention and said, "You're blocking our water." At that time, they went back, and the response I received, and it was through a roundabout way because I didn't directly call them, but the person that was the inspector on the site was involved, and they came back and they said, "Well, we know we're blocking it, and we know that's where your water used to go. We're going to block it, and if it ever gets deep enough, it'll back clear up down to the south to the wilds." Now, during his explanation there, he shows you this little horseshoe thing that they got going up there. If you go and measure how much water actually could ever has to leave that area, cross around and back, it's very minimal because it can't come from me. Because there's a ditch between the oxbow, I got to think if he shows it up there now. There's an oxbow, this picture went farther south, you'd see the oxbow. But anyway, there's an oxbow that goes out right to the Cheyenne River that causes it so that no water from the north could ever come south, nor water from the south could ever go north. And that's the reason why it has to cross south of that and come over to, is that the oxbow right there? Yeah, you can see it comes right up to the Cheyenne. Notice he said it's red? That's the culvert right there across. Our water used to flow that direction. So with that, the amount that he was showing up on the other part up there, I doubt there's hardly any water that ever traveled across that. What's really interesting is this whole year you could have, if you wanted to, very easily measure all of our runoff into your system. And the reason why is because there's only one culvert. And that was the one, if you take and drive into the wilds, on the north side of that there's an inlet. That's the only inlet we have. And at this moment, you're talking about everyone from 52nd Avenue and north. On the east and the west, right against Cheyenne, all of our water goes there. With that, when you think about it and you say, yes, our water does come to the Cheyenne, out to the road, the Cheyenne. One other thing I wanted to point out with it is if you notice here, he talks about all the red around this. One of the other things that was brought up in the other meetings is that because you're next to the river, they figure the water runoff on lots that are next to the river aren't going to see the same runoff because it's going to run to the river. You look at the red on there, right along the river is built up. The Cheyenne River has a bank probably about 4 feet tall all the way through it. And the purpose for it is to keep the water inside the Cheyenne during high water times. So I've lived there for 21 years. I know what water is all about. We know that what's put in place to keep the water from the Cheyenne from coming out of it during the time of high water, keep it so that the high water travels through the diversion, protects us. We all understand that. With that, I guess at this moment, I'm not sure that the models, first off, I guess maybe I should say this, is that what you're hearing right now, what I'm telling you about our water and how it travels, is the first time in any of these meetings that's been presented. Because multiple times I've heard that our water goes to 52nd Avenue. It has never went to 52nd Avenue. That is uphill. No water can travel uphill. As for if it's ever going to run over that driveway, if anybody knows how deep the ditches are right now on the Cheyenne, so if you think of the paved road, how deep the ditch is beside it, that road, the driveway going into that pumping station is exactly the same height. So the 2-foot measurement, I think, is off a little bit. As a matter of fact, it's probably off at least by 2 feet. It's probably closer to 4 feet. So I don't think you'll ever, I know for sure that most of our front yards will be full of water by the time it would ever reach that, to be able to go over that. But I guess tonight I want to let you know that the pumping station that's in place out there is way more than what we would ever need for our water. And that's after living there 21 years. I know what water comes out of there. And again, like I said, when it comes to true drainage, yes, we need the Cheyenne to get the Cheyenne Road to get our water out of there. No different than anybody else needs, but our water drainage was actually in place ahead of time. And all you need to do is provide us with what we had originally. We're good. In 21 years, we've never needed any more than that. So appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Brooke Silbernagle? Luke and Paula Simley?
It's Lute.
I thought so, but I wasn't sure if I wrote it wrong.
That's all right.
Sorry about that.
A lot of people don't know. It's short for Luther. But yeah, I live at 118 50th Avenue East, and Paul and I have been out there for 22 years, and I don't know if I can add any more to what one of my neighbors just said there, other than the fact that we've really never experienced any issues with our drainage, because it's always found its way to the Cheyenne, or to the diversion. Everything's gone west out of our development, north, and then west along 40th Avenue. And I guess our feeling, along with our neighbors, is that if there's a benefit to us, we would, we can participate, but we're not going to see the kind of benefit that I think that we're being assessed right at this point, or what's being proposed. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Daryl Vaniel?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Commissioners, for the opportunity. My name is Daryl Vaniel, 112 50th Avenue East. First, I'd like to thank John Shockley and Ina for meeting with a few of us people last week to ask some questions. Not all our questions were fully answered, but I think it was a good meeting. And also thanks to Dustin in the past for meeting with us. I'll get into maybe some more of this later, but I'd have to say, Dustin, I'm deeply disappointed in your presentation. And thanks to Commissioner Simmons for asking that question, because to convey to this commission, who has to make a decision, that our water flows north and around like that, is totally misleading. Totally misleading, and I don't know how you can do a presentation like that when you know that it didn't do that, because we stated it in our meeting to you. So I'm deeply disappointed in that, and I'm not here to throw people under the bus. Trust me, I'm not. And then the other thing is, I happen to have a mathematics major. I know how you can use numbers, and all you did was use numbers about the people that have higher per square foot. You didn't go into undeveloped land or the exact numbers for Nelson acres at all. And I think that your presentation is very misleading, so I'll leave it at that. I want to testify to opposition to the amount of assessment for my property. I wish to make it clear that I'm not opposing the assessment in its entirety, but rather the current amount of assessment for drainage that, number one, for at least a year or more is completely blocked by the roadway put in to access the building structure which was built as part of Storm Drain Improvement District 4060. Number two, even after this is remedied by additional work to be done on Cheyenne Street next summer, any water from McManus Estates will not likely enter this storm drain system in an overland manner unless a catastrophic event greater than the floods of 2009, 10, 11, or a summer event greater than the summer event of 2000 occurs. I think you've heard that from people who have lived there, and I've been in my home since 1999. Number three, the residents of McMahon Estates, if they so choose, will not see even the possibility of hooking up directly to this system for at least another 6 to 8 years, since the Cheyenne project from 40 to 52nd is not even on MetroCog's list today. Number four, we have never had a problem with stormwater drainage until the 40th Avenue project was built in a manner which blocked our drainage to the west. So something for which we never previously had a problem becomes a problem because of the changing of drainage patterns which had been established years ago, and now we must pay to get adequate storm drainage back in a more urban-like manner. And on top of this, we're being asked to pay more dollars than most any of the developments for which stormwater drainage was achieved by obstructing ours. I think that summarizes my thoughts and the thoughts of many here tonight. But let's talk about something else that transpired with this project that should not have happened, and that is communication. And I know that you're talking about doing something about that, but please allow me the time to expound on that. I'm not in any way trying to point fingers at anyone, but rather pointing out a process whereby the project could have been better communicated, built, supported by the developments that now have to pay for the project. In a day when transparency and communication on everything is demanded by the public, there was neither on Project 4060. First meeting that this was brought to the West Fargo Commission was February 20th of 2017. During that meeting, on the consent agenda was the following, and I know many of you are new, so please listen carefully. On the agenda, consent agenda, was the following: create assessment district for Storm Improvement District 4060. Authorize engineer to prepare engineer's report. Approve engineer's report for Storm Improvement District 4060. Authorize the engineer to prepare plans and specs for Storm Improvement 4060. Approve the plans and specs for Storm Improvement District 4060, and authorize ad for bids for Storm Improvement District 4060. One meeting, all of this was on the consent agenda, which means there was no discussion but simply approval along with the other consent agenda items. No public hearing or comment on the project, and no commission comment on the project. The project at that time was estimated to be $1.3 million. Now, I know how consent agendas go. I'm familiar with that, and I know that you get your materials, and I know you study them, so I'm not again, suggesting in any manner that you didn't come to the meeting with some knowledge of this. I'm just pointing out, look at those 5 or 6 things that were all done at one time. Fast forward to May 1st of that year, only 3 months later. During this meeting, evidently significant revisions were made to the original engineer's report as well as plans and specs. Once again, the consent agenda item dealing with Project 4060 was approval of the new engineer's report and approval of plans and specs. Once again, no discussion by the commission and no public hearing. Consent agenda was approved. Now the project is estimated to be $1,775,000, an increase of $375,000. Today, the project is somewhere around 2.4, 2.5. I can't get an exact amount. I do know that you paid bills equal to $2.232 million. So we've gone from 1.4 to 2.4. My understanding is that all changes in project costs from the first meeting in February of 2017 have been approved by this commission, all with meeting minutes reflecting no conversation by the commission, all action being consent agenda approvals, all with no public knowledge or opportunity for hearing or comments. Now, this has the appearance, I'm only saying the appearance, of simply being a blank check, and that whatever was brought to this commission had to be and was approved in an effort to simply get the project done because it has a connection to the work being done and what will be done on Cheyenne Street. It was only by accident that Carol Lewis happened to notice this in the assessments in the paper, and that is why we attended the special assessment hearing and are here before you today. We have all been taken back by the lack of communication, the lack of having a public hearing on the project before plans and specs were approved, the lack of direct mailing to notify all of us about the public hearing at the Special Assessment Commission meeting several weeks ago. Yes, we know no laws were broken, but the lack of full transparency on projects like this is ethically wrong. Might a more acceptable project have been the result? Might there have been suggestions from landowners that would have benefited this project, such as making use of the pond in the South River development? Might there have been discussion on how this would be paid for prior to simply moving ahead with the project and just hoping for no pushback? Can anyone imagine the outcry if the FM diversion was completed without any public meetings and public input was only sought when that project was completed? I can attest to the hundreds of meetings that I was part of over 10 years, and we still have not turned a shovel on the actual diversion channel itself. I have here in my hand on October 10th, Wednesday, West Fargo Pioneer, front page above the fold headlines, Commissioners Continue Special Assessment Education. In this article, it states that once the Commission accepts the engineer's report, a public hearing is held, and if more than 51% property owners in the district protest a project, it can be denied. I've been told that this was only for significant street projects. I would like to suggest that this be the process for all significant projects. Why can't this be, or why wasn't this the process when you undertook this project, 4060, which complements one of the biggest street projects ever undertaken by this city, that being the Cheyenne Street? Where was a public hearing on Project 4060? How can a project of this size and magnitude never have a public hearing until the project is completed, and the only public hearing is for the purpose of taking comments on the amount of assessments? This $2.5 million project has more impact on my pocketbook than the $2.4 billion FM diversion project. Yet there was no opportunity for voices to be heard. No opportunity to perhaps have a better project because of public comments. No opportunity to know well in advance what might be financially impacting us. Is this really the way that assessments should be handled? If not legally wrong, surely it is ethically wrong. For the purpose of some historical perspective, for some new commissioners and the public, I'd like to point out, and this is not looking for a pat on the back for anybody that was part of this, but I'd like to point out that if it weren't for some of the established developments who are currently impacted by this project, there would not be any city of West Fargo city boundaries south of I-94. If you don't believe me, check it out. And you'll see that individuals in our developments made the city aware that Fargo had an agenda item for their commission meeting some 17 or 18 years ago, which would have annexed all land up to Cheyenne Street. Once Fargo did that, their extraterritorial area would have extended westward and prohibited West Fargo from any development south of I-94. How do I know this? Number one, I was a West Fargo commissioner from 1986 to 99. I know the discussions that took place about the possibility of going south of 94, and in 1999 there was none because of the infrastructure costs. Number two, I was one of the individuals who made West Fargo aware of the pending Fargo action. Number three, I was part of the mediation process that led to the establishment of boundaries in existence today. Once the city was made aware of Fargo's intended action, Brian Nugabar, West Fargo's city attorney at the time, did some quick work to prepare documents for the land being used for the Cheyenne diversion to be annexed at the very next West Fargo Commission meeting. In fact, the meeting time was changed to be earlier in the day in order to preempt Fargo from carrying out their annexation first. In essence, West Fargo annexed Cheyenne diversion land, thus extending themselves south of 94 and creating their own extraterritorial area that caused a new dilemma for the city of Fargo and their intended plans to block West Fargo from having any development south of interstate. I attended meetings at that time prior to this action in a home east of the Cheyenne River from my home. Mayor Bruce Furness attended that. City Administrator Pat Zavril attended that meeting. And we're trying to coerce our cooperation by telling us that our specials would be capped if we went with Fargo. To West Fargo's credit, they did no such thing. But they did say, we have no infrastructure, and certainly coming across an annexation is going to cause development, and we have no infrastructure. So they, for their reasons and for us to lead into it, they allowed us about 5 years, I believe, before annexation would take place. They also indicated that the current developments would never be pressured into moving from septic systems to sanitary systems or any other things like that. That, in other words, when we were ready, we would be welcome to join West Fargo. Now, I'm not suggesting that anyone is forcing us to attach to the storm drain system here, but the fact is, you're making us pay for it. Now, I'm not looking for any gifts or favors as a result of what happened nearly 20 years ago, but I'm asking that careful consideration be given to the very people that have allowed you to grow to the city that you have become. We paid for our roads and drainage when we bought our lots and built our homes. It is only through city expansion that our storm drainage has been blocked. Now we are being asked to pay for storm drain project for which we have never had the need for in the past and will never be directly hooked to this system for many years to come. Not asking for no assessments. I'm not asking that the $600 regional assessment be lowered. I'm only asking that the local assessment for Storm Drain Improvement District 4060 project be lowered. Yes, in fact, cut in half from 10 cents to 5 per foot. I'm asking this. I'm not suggesting that everyone else is on board with that. I'm just saying that seems to be fair to me. I would further ask that other developments benefiting from storm drainage in a fashion similar to McMahon, Nelson, current Nelson Acres, and current undeveloped land, for example, be assessed in a similar manner that we are. When these areas are further split or developed further, yes, there may be other storm drain work for which they'll have to pay, but the difference is this. They'll be making money off that land and off the splits. We cannot split our property and sell it off to someone else to pay for our assessments. Those landowners and developers can. And that's why I say you can make numbers speak any way you want to about the 28, 38, 48 cents. The bottom line is what's the total, what's the total amount that they're paying there? You want us to pay 30 cents and have some people paying $21 and up to $30,000 for storm drainage that they never, had a need for up until now? I mean, that's what it is. It was 30 cents. It's down to $5, $6, $7, in some cases $10,000 and $11,000. Concludes my remarks. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
That is the end of the list that I have, but I know there are others here. So.
Okay, if there's anyone else that'd like to speak, they could come to the podium.
Good evening, I'm Jason Benson. I'm at 4505 South River Estates Way in West Fargo. I want to thank you for holding this hearing tonight. And as a member of South River Estates Way, I also want to thank you for the consideration to treat us as a subdivision, a platted subdivision regarding the regional assessment. This is significant for us, as that significantly reduces our regional per unit equivalency from the 6 to 9 equivalent units down to 1 to 1.5. Had that information been presented to us prior to the 40th and 32nd Avenue assessments, where everybody else in the area was assessed $2,500. Our assessments were anywhere from $16,000 to $22,000, and so this would have been a significant difference for us in that 32nd and 40th, and will make a difference in this and future assessment districts. For our development, I think it truly was the shock of seeing the difference in that 40th and 32nd Avenue assessment that took us back. And then when we looked at what this current assessment district is, what is fair and reasonable, and what can we handle in the long term if we were to continue to get those types of assessments. Obviously, that's not something that's viable to continue to have $10,000, $20,000 assessments coming at us on nearly an annual basis. To the other neighbors that have discussed what is the benefits, I do understand that we have to pay the regional benefit for the future expansion on Chan Street. There are benefits, but going back to that local benefit, going back to the fact that our drainage is currently cut off, and we've had the last 6 weeks, we've had some pretty significant rainfall, and yet, yes, there is a little bit of water in the ditches, but that benefit is that $4,000, $6,000, and $11,000 worth of benefit, and that's what I really don't see that. Moving forward, I would echo what other folks have said, having some sort of reduced local assessment, whether it's, as Darrell had stated, going to 5 cents, but having some sort of reduced assessment is what I'd be in favor of. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Is there any other public comment?
Mike? I'd like to ask a question. I'm sorry, I didn't realize there were any more. Well, you can come up and I'll ask it afterwards.
Bob Jensen, 4406 South River Estates Way. We've lived there for about 16 years. The house that we're currently in was built in 1979. It was the first house in the development. If you look at our development, all of our homes were raised up because it was pre-diversion time. So in terms of any catastrophic water hitting our homes, it won't happen. The other question I have, and this goes to Dustin. In an earlier deal, we asked him what the absorption rate was used in the model. I heard 23, someone said it was 33. Do you recall?
The 23 and 33 was a relation to the assessment options, right?
No, this had to do with what you used in your model as the absorption rate of the water. So if you had X number of rain, the soil would absorb those amounts.
Right. This is not working. Yeah, that information is specifically available in those stormwater reports. I did have a 3.5-hour meeting with Mr. Banyo and Mr. Benson where we went through the stormwater report with the engineer in charge of that. I don't know specifically off the top of my head what number is used, but I do know that it does take into account absorption, evaporation. Yep.
Let me ask this question. When Eagle Run was put in, it was originally supposed to be a septic system, 1-acre lots. And they were unable to do that because they could not get enough permeable soil to support a septic system. Hence, the city of West Fargo came down and put services to them, correct?
Yep.
Huh?
No.
Nope. No? Okay. Kevin? What's the reason for moving away from the larger lots to...
You come up here and address the question if you'd like.
Kevin Buckles. The reason that they were not done was actually the developer's choice. They were approved to put in 1-acre lots. At the 11th hour, they made a business decision to talk this. They'd asked the city to come down. The city actually said no. They proceeded to go ahead with the 1-acre lots. Someone actually forced the city's hand to either we better develop or not, because otherwise this whole section is going to turn into rural subdivisions. And so they chose, after the city said, yes, I guess we'll serve it, they came back and subdivided. They were actually approved for 1-acre lots, and there were 3 homes built with septic.
Well, there's a lot of them over there.
There's 3 homes that are on the full-size lots that were built prior to this. So, I mean, I'm not, just
Kevin,
Kevin,
didn't they actually do that like 3 times? They went from 1 acre down to half-acre, then down to quarter because of a business decision, right? If I recall back then?
The first part of Eagle Run, well, actually, people don't realize, the first part of Eagle Run was north up there where the old farmstead was the first Eagle Run plat that was done. That was actually the second phase that was done down here. They ghost platted it right from the get-go, assuming that someday they would probably go there anyway, but the developer chose to do that. Then Mark subsequently thereafter, once the city was there, I was here back then, we all went, who's going to go build out there in the middle of a field? But they did. And then they subdivided subsequently thereafter and increased the density even more.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
Sorry, Bob.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you for correcting me. I hate to be wrong. The other question, Dustin, if you would pull up the district that you had there with the green areas on it. No, it's the one earlier that the whole district.
I'm frozen here. Let me come up there and...
It's this one right here on the screen. I didn't touch it either.
No, that's okay. I'm sure I touched something when I left.
There you go.
Right.
You notice the green areas, Carmel Place, South River Estates, and McMahon's is the area from 40th Avenue south down to near 52nd. That's just R3 development. If I understood correct, your model says that those green areas are going to provide 67% of the runoff into this system?
Yes.
64?
64% from I mean, this is a drawing that I prepared on a PDF, so there's, but yeah, for the most part, from the neighborhoods.
But I guess I'd ask you to look at those green areas, especially in Carmel, South River Estate, and McMahon. They're all 3 to 5 acre lots with not a whole lot of concrete on it other than driveway and the foundation of the house. You go across to the west, look how those lots are plugged in there. And the vast percentage, much higher percentage of impermeable surface area than what you'll find over there. Now, if we have 64% impermeable surfaces, as they do over there, maybe. But the fact that our impermeable systems are small, and we're yet paying for it in those 3 divisions 20% of the project as it currently stands. And in this case, you're saying we're providing 64% of the water, which common sense tells me that doesn't make sense.
So, go back to this particular slide. So that's where the model does take into consideration, like you asked, impervious surface versus pervious surface, time of concentration. All those are factors within this report and model that is prepared. And based on the flow, there's 400 and some CFS coming into the system. 64% of that is attributed from these basins.
From those on the east side of Cheyenne.
And the west.
That's not what you said earlier. Go back to your slide before, where you had them broken out. If I misunderstood that, I apologize. Keep going.
There's these areas here.
And I'm saying, if I understood you correct, you're saying the green areas will provide 64% of the runoff into this system. Is that correct?
That's information, yes.
Like I say, common sense, looking at that map and the impermeable systems that are to the west versus our lots, which are all grass, lots of trees, we absorb our water when it comes. It has to really come in a high time. And one of the comments, well, the water never leaves my lot, I was one of those that said that. My lot, up against the river, my culverts are blocked, the water can't go anywhere. When it does rain, a large amount, it's got to be several inches before water's collected in my ditch. In the spring, when the snow melts, there's water there, but I can tell it disappears because the frost goes out and there's just a shallow ice sitting there. So I really challenge the future benefit to the east side of Cheyenne, because we're being asked to pay for the majority of that project and for the future of that project, because we're not going to get any benefit today or tomorrow after that, but we have these assessments on our lots. And for us, that's a discount in our value of our property. So if I go to sell it to someone and they see $15,000 assessment, they're going to say, well, I got to pay that, so that should bring your property value down. The contrary to that, when we ask the city, I says, well, will you reduce our property value for that assessment? Oh, no, it's an improvement. So your property value will go up, so we get to pay more taxes. Seems to me we're going in a circle there in the wrong direction. So I guess in light of what's been said, that Darrell said, we're fine where we're at. You can plug the ditches, because we can get rid of our water for a lot cheaper than that. It isn't hard to put a pump in and pump it over the dike into the Cheyenne.
I don't think you could actually do that, can you?
Well, but up in Carmel, you are already in Carmel. The water flows naturally in Carmel up along 40th, east along 40th, and there's a culvert underneath 40th Avenue. When they expanded it, it dumps directly into the Cheyenne.
That I don't know. I'm
Follow the
going
water.
west, yeah. I've been out there and looked. Going west, I don't know what goes east.
There's a swale.
East.
There's a swale in the northwest corner of Fargo that it comes to the same culvert that we had a discussion on before. There are, and that's where each and every individual lot has a different drainage pattern than the other. I understand that, and you know, it's no different than I remember a few years ago someone went and removed the dike along the river so that they could have a nice gradual slope down to the river. Their lot drains now to the river. Now they had to go back and reestablish that dike. But my point is, we're focusing on a neighborhood as a whole, and that drainage coming to Cheyenne Street.
And Commissioner Simmons, you took these pictures that are shown right there.
I didn't.
Oh, I took them.
You took them. I haven't seen any kayaks or canoes out there. That's after we've had several inches of rain this past week with snow. Yes, it collects there for a little bit, but you go to the culvert, the water has to be about 1.5 feet, 2 feet higher in order to flow through the culvert to the other side. So those ditches have become our retaining system within our developments. In our development, we have septic tanks. Mine has been in there for 40 years, not a problem, because our soil percolates so well. I can go out and pump water onto the soil for an extended period of time. It's gone. It doesn't run off or anything. It just soaks into the ground. So, with that, that's the end of my comments. I think the future benefit is way overstated. And what Darrell said, 5 cents a square foot is still too much, but in order to move on, would entertain it. Thank you.
Are there any additional public comments?
Hi, my name is Elton Tufte. I live at 4200 Carmel Place. And my assessment as it stands right now is $7,738. A lot of disappointments in this whole thing, and I think one of the biggest ones is that these meetings didn't take place before the first shovel of dirt was moved. All the comments that have been made here, I agree with all of them. I think they're all strong. There are lots of reasons why this project either never should have happened or it should have been downsized substantially. It happened in my backyard. That's where the bulk of the pipe is, on the east side of Cheyenne. And it just amazes me the size of the pipe and those two, I think they're 19,000 gallon per hour pumps that were put in. And if you think about the way the river flows, if we get enough water that the Cheyenne starts coming up and all these catch basins start filling up and those pumps kick in, it's going to come across under our backyard, and all that additional water is going to go into the Cheyenne and raise that some more. So I don't see any benefit whatsoever for our property or everybody else in Carmel Place going forward down the Cheyenne River. It's a hindrance rather than a benefit. Talk about disappointments. I agree with Darrell. I was very disappointed in the presentation. I didn't believe half of it. It just doesn't make any sense. The 64% coming off our side of the street, like I said, I live there. I live where the project was. I walk out in the backyard almost every day and look. The rains that we've had, there's very little water even collects in the ditch. And we've had some fairly substantial rains recently. A lot of the other points, and I'm not going to go through those. I think you all saw the letters. Every resident in Carmel Place, you have their signature, all agreeing that the assessments are higher than what we think they should be. And the culvert that didn't get put in that approach back there, I think you said it was going to cost an additional $25,000. I'd have a hard time believing we can tear that whole approach back out and fix it for $25,000. It seems like something, $25,000 that should have been spent when it was put in the first time. And I also questioned the DOT report, and we didn't get a real clear answer on that, but I really doubt that they went beyond the street limits and looked at any rest of the plan on where this water was coming from. And I guess the one other comment that you made was that in your presentation that it could have been 50 cents, could have been 30 cents, and they took it down to 10 cents. For sympathy reasons, we don't need sympathy. We're willing to pay our fair share, and whatever that comes out to be, we'll belly up and pay it, but we don't need the city sympathy or more engineering sympathy. That's all I have.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
I wasn't going to get up and speak. I was going to let my neighbors speak, but I realized sitting here, my name is Sonia Swangler, and I've lived at 4402 South River Estates Way since 1993. So we have a lot of history in that area. Our yard, the culvert they're talking about that goes to the west, I will tell you that more than anything, that culvert is used for cats to move from one side of the road to the other. It's very seldom wet. During the flood of 1997, the river was high. The Cheyenne was being maxed out, and it was scary for us because the river was so high. I thought, is this actually going to come over, and are we going to flood? We knew we had the diversion, but we didn't know if it was going to hold. West Fargo City was out there, or the county, whatever, was out on the road. They were diking up right along the road where the river turns. And I thought, okay, I'm going to run out there and talk to these guys and find out what should we be expecting. He looked at me. I said, I see you're sandbagging out here. Should we be worried that we're going to flood? Our house is going to flood? And he looked at me, and he looked at our house, and he said, lady, if your house floods, all of West Fargo's going under. He said it's going to go under before you do, before your house does. During that time, the water table was so high, we didn't even have to put in like plugs in our basement, worried about flooding, for our basement. There was no water issues at all. The water table wasn't high in our yard. The drainage is incredible out there. It truly is. And I just wanted to speak with our history of the time since we've been there. For us, you'd hardly even know that the whole city is in a flood situation. We just haven't we go on like usual. And my parents lost their home on Riverside Drive in Grand Forks. I'm very aware of flooding. And I will just tell you that we have good drainage, and that map, I don't know where they get those figures, I don't know where that comes from, but boy is it off. It's way off. And I have the history to tell you that. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
Robert Klinger, 4418 South River Estates Way. The special assessment on my property was $12,805. I thank Daryl for doing all the work today. Appreciate that. I'll cover some of his things quickly that he did, but I tried to follow along with Dustin's deal with some notes that I had. It said that more engineering did a report in each neighborhood to figure out the water and all that. I brought it up at two of the other meetings. There's a 3 million gallon retention pond in South River Estates that drains part of McMahon and part of South River Estates, and that was never considered in any of this. It's 3 million gallons of water, and it doesn't go anywhere but floods out my yard and my neighbor's yard because the pond rises up and takes out our trees. But if you did a report in every neighborhood, I don't know how you can miss a 700-foot long pond. And it's already been covered, but, the development out there, we were Barnes County Township. We've paid 2 times to have the water taken care of out there. And, there's no water that does enter the system, as everybody has said, and he put in his slide. It really doesn't. I mean, we're banked to the river, and you think about it like with Bob Jensen's property and Kathy's and somebody else's. If the road that divides our property is here, everything drains to the pond on this side. There's no like culverts that wrap around and bring it across the road to even get to Cheyenne, so it sticks in Bob's yard and my yard and whatever, and it just sinks into the soil. That water doesn't, you know, run around, go through two other people's yards, over their driveways, and then get to Cheyenne Street. It just doesn't happen. If there's any drainage from our properties, you know, the three houses that actually face Cheyenne Street, it's a little bit out of their backyard, but you're talking a 300 or 350 foot backyard. I mean, the little bit of water that's coming from there, it's not making it. It's going into the soil before it gets there. And I mean, just another thing too, you know, the commission has already stated in previous meetings that there is no benefit to us. I think Daryl and John went back and forth about it, you know, whatever case history, and you know, you can assess it based on future benefit. I don't understand being assessed on something that we have no benefit from. It's already been stated that we don't have a benefit from, but it might happen at someday in the future. And I believe it's North Dakota Century Code 2317. It allows municipalities to levy assessments on properties that were not originally assessed. I don't understand why we can't be assessed when we actually benefit from this project. I mean, you know, some of the people, they're paying $3,000 to $4,000. I mean, the people in our neighborhood, like my property is almost $13,000. Craig and Sanders, $14,000 per house. And there's no benefit to it. I mean, it's unbelievable. And then more engineering, you know, I'm all over in my notes here, but it was also stated that, you know, drainage would improve in front of your house. Well, if it doesn't improve in front of your house, where does it improve? And then, Dustin, if you could bring up that regional and local deal with the green on the side. And I'm not a math major like Daryl, so might have to correct me here, but so, yep, thank you. You know, we're getting some sort of, you know, sympathy discount or whatever, but the green is actually paying the local and the regional. So the regional is going up because the local is getting discounted. So we're getting this discount on the regional, but then we're also paying the it's a net effect of zero. I mean, I'm sure there's a little bit of dollar-wise, but if we're paying for both, for us to get a benefit on the, you know, local and then have to pay the increase on the regional, you know, there was no benefit or discount to us there. And then, you know, Bob had talked about it too. I mean, are we even allowed the option of putting in our own ditch block to kill this? You know, you look at just our properties in South River Estates, it's almost $90,000 or $100,000. Well, we can buy a lot of pumps and take care of our own water for $100,000 because we don't have a problem today, but I mean, the little bit that we could in some catastrophic flood, $90,000 buys a lot of pumps. Yeah, I mean, everything else has kind of been covered, but I would just, if we're not benefiting from it, I don't see how we can be assessed, and especially at the amounts that we are compared to some of the other properties. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Any other public comment? Last time, is there any additional public comment? Seeing none, we'll close the public portion of it. I want to thank you all for being very respectful in your comments. You know, I know it's an emotional thing for a lot of you, and appreciate your feedback. And obviously, this is going to take some more consideration, more work by the staff and the city. So, John, do you have any additional comments?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner, Acting Mayor Thorstad. So the public hearing portion is closed. We'll be taking back the information to review all of the appeals and bring that before the commission. We're going to be asking you for a special commission meeting in 2 weeks to deal with the other improvement districts. I would note to set expectations that you'd be making a decision at the next commission meeting. The public comment period is done, and And so I know it would be difficult and people would want to talk, but it's done. It wouldn't be fair to take additional comment after the public hearing is closed. And so there'll be plenty of opportunity to debate and discuss the decision at that time. The only real guidance I would be seeking is if there's a desire by the commission to have staff review and implement our recommendation regarding South Rivers Estate based upon that we had recommended that they be treated as platted property, and we can take the other information back and analyze that. But that's the only recommendation I'm prepared tonight to move forward with.
Commissioner Thurston, I do have a question though, because everybody pretty much brought it up, John, and hopefully you can answer that. I probably realized that we didn't have to notify people because of the camp protest out this project, but what Daryl said, all those things that particular night on the agenda, and I was here, I know that. Was there a reason why we had it all boom, boom on the, do you recall why we did that? Because I don't. I mean, it does sound like we just pushed that part through.
Well, I'll let Dustin comment to the merits.
I know it's hard to go way back, Dustin, and comment on that, but those are some of the questions that I wanted to ask you guys today, and unfortunately we couldn't get together.
So just from a legal standpoint, you're correct. For a storm sewer project, they aren't able to be protested out. The article in the newspaper is correct. If you're putting in a street project, those are can be protested out. Going to why the item was on the consent agenda, I'm going to defer to the city engineer.
I'm not 100% sure as to why all three of those items, and when I say three, I'm referring to creating a district, approving a report, and moving on with plans and specs, but there's 5 or 6 in total, but the 3 high points there. It's not uncommon that we do that when we're trying to, if we're trying to race to get a bid set out, for example, so that we get the most competitive pricing. If we want to bid it by March, for example, so that we're, competitive. But there's other factors and reasons. I'm not specifically sure as to why this particular project moved forward with its first action to take action on all 3 items.
And I don't recall either, so I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. I'm just trying to refresh my memory, and I'm thinking maybe it was a bidding process. If it was in February, we had to get them together to get it out, but.
And I can't say for sure.
I think that's some of the recommendations for the future. We'll probably have to look at maybe better notification and things as you go through your assessment committee, because it really doesn't sound quite right. But I get we can do it, and we probably had to, but it does sound a little bit, I don't know, maybe not quite right. Obviously, we're paying for that today. Not that it would have probably made any difference at all, but at least they would have known. And not to put any blame on you at all, by the way. I mean, this has nothing to do with you. So the commission made the decisions at that time. That was our responsibility. That was Commissioner Thorsted's.
Thank you for clarifying that. Dustin, quick question. If this improvement storm sewer lift station wasn't done, what would be happening to the whole region then with their existing storm sewers? Because I live in Eagle Run. And like everybody else said, I've already paid for mine, but yet we're improving it. So what would happen if this wasn't improved?
So, I'll handle it in pieces maybe. So, again, as a couple of residents brought up, when 40th Avenue was expanded, that did change the nature of how the drainage was previously collected. Again, as it was stated correctly, it used to drain west along 40th to the diversion and into a PTO pump station that would pump it into the diversion channel. Urbanizing or expanding 40th Avenue changed that. We could no longer we couldn't increase volumes of water to continue to utilize this PTO pump that was in place to deal with, for the most part, rural, undeveloped over land runoff. So when that was done, again, a slide a while back had a series of new storm lines that are in place at the intersection of 40th Avenue and Cheyenne Street. So now that water does or is intended to get there. Obviously, I can't argue the fact that the driveway was put in with without the culvert. So, but that storm system in that intersection is now there to collect that runoff and put it back into this pond, which ultimately then feeds this lift station. And that's how it's supposed to work today. Next year, when the Cheyenne Street is reconstructed past 40th Avenue, that will now include a new storm system that'll take it from there and directly and put it on the east side of that pond. And along with that, we'll put in a couple new ditch inlets that'll help drain that portion of the ditch. Long term, as we continue to go south with Cheyenne Street, and like Mr. Vano said, it currently is not in a 5-year program to be completed, but after the schools referendum passed, and we had a coordination meeting last week with schools and parks, it was very evident that there's going to be some transportation issues in the near future if that high school is built in Horace, and of course with anticipating some potential growth down there. So one of the common themes from our meeting last week, as you guys were there, was we need to start planning and getting ready for whatever infrastructure challenges we're going to have, which will include bringing Cheyenne Street to the forefront. And it's not in a plan today, but things change, and with that referendum coming through, I think there's going to be some interest to continue to improve Cheyenne Street. And as Cheyenne Street is reconstructed down to 52nd Avenue, we will continue to put in a series of new storm lines and drains that will improve the drainage along that ditch. Thank you.
Any other comments? John, you did not want an action item on this, or do you want to table it?
No, there'd be no action item tonight. I'm going to be taking back all of the arguments made tonight, just looking at them, organizing them for the commission to go through. The only thing that I would be looking for tonight is if there's a general consensus about if we should implement that change regarding South River Estates changing the equivalent unit. Doesn't mean that there won't be other changes, but that was one of our recommendations. And so if there's a general consensus, I will put that into the draft document.
Is that the plan to the, or the unplanned to the plan, you mean, you're referring to? Yeah. I'm thinking that's fair. Would agree with that.
And we'll bring back that information at the special meeting that'll be on the 29th. And once again, just setting expectations for the public. My advice is not to take any additional public comments at all on the process. It's a process where people have had an opportunity to put their input in, their appeal. It wouldn't be fair to give some people an opportunity to speak again and others not. So it's just better not to take any further public comment. It's not to say the commission can't debate it and those sorts of things, but just no additional public comment.
Okay, with that advice, again, thank you everyone for coming here and expressing your concerns. I'll gladly pass the gavel back down a couple spots to Bruce.
Thank you, Commissioner Thorstead. I too want to thank the public for engaging in this conversation this evening. I think if anything that's going to come about of this is that the process that the City of West Fargo has been doing with regard to special assessment districts, with regard to communication, with regard to public notifications, and I hope that my fellow commissioners up here will agree with me that that's got to change, and it's got to change right now. Please don't. And I'm also going to say to staff and to engineering and to city administration that if we are going to rush sometimes on a Thursday afternoon to put items on the agenda and we put it on the consent agenda without further vetting or totally vetting it with the public, we're being remiss to our duties. The public has an opportunity to express their opinions, and they certainly have a right to know. So, ladies and gentlemen, you helped us move forward on that process, and for that I thank you. So, moving on to the next order of business. Review the change order number 2 for sewer improvement, project number 1308. Chris?
Mayor, Commissioners, in front of you tonight is a request from the City of Fargo to make a change order to our 19th Avenue Fargo Sewer Connection Project. They wish to add the metering vault, which is the large receiving vessel for all our sewage. The project cost is $822,770. It's already been vetted through the contractor. The change order is attached. John has also negotiated a agreement with the City of Fargo. If you want to cover the particulars on that.
Yeah, just briefly recognizing the late hour. The reason why we needed an agreement between West Fargo and Fargo was the meter vault is actually on the Fargo side. You'll recall back to our sewer agreement with Fargo in that we were building the pipe up to Fargo's line and they're building the meter vault. Because the meter vault is on the Fargo side, it made sense to change order into the contract, but because Fargo is going to own it, we need an agreement between the two parties and the contractor so that once the construction work is done, ownership of that feature is transferred to Fargo along with the risk, along with the warranties. Fargo is paying 100% of this, and it makes sense. It's more cost effective through the change order. It's just we need to make sure that the rights for Fargo flow through the agreement because it's our contractor installing the improvements under our agreement. So we put together a meter vault installation agreement. Fargo has reviewed it. We'll approve it hopefully tonight, and then it'll go to Fargo. They'd have to approve it.
Next Monday night.
And the contractor has to sign off on it too, since they're transferring the warranties to Fargo.
I'm available for any questions.
Any questions of Fargo? We've all had an opportunity to review the agreement that Mr. Shockley put together, and it would appear that it's ironclad to protect the city of West Fargo. So,
I move we accept it.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. It's been moved. Is there a second, please? Second. Second by Commissioner Simmons. Been moved and seconded to approve the change order number 2 for sewer improvement project number 1308. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item number 3, review the conditional use permit for home occupation hair salon. Tim Silver.
Thank you, Your Honor. We received this application to accommodate the ability of the applicant to operate a home-based business. This would have customers coming to her home. This is provided for within the residential district as a conditional use, meaning that prior to the applicant's ability to operate the home occupation, we need to follow the conditional use permit process. This requires notifying property owners within 350 feet, holding a public hearing at the Planning Commission. Upon recommendation of the Planning Commission, the City Commission makes the final determination based upon relevant facts and comments from the public. The City Commission may include conditions deemed appropriate for approval. In regards to this application, staff notes the proposed addition to be constructed of the same materials as the structure, requiring no outward appearance that would indicate it is a business. The addition does not make up greater than 25% of the main floor area, and the use does not appear to create a nuisance to neighboring homes. In similar cases in the past, the city has added a condition that should the property be sold or if complaints of 4 or more are received within 60 days, that the city could bring the permit in for review or revocation. With regard to the criteria for granting a conditional use outlined in city ordinances, staff does not note any concerns. We received complaints by phone and email from a neighbor who lives down the street behind the property with concern of a business operating in a residential environment and related traffic on what was reported to be a busy street. During the public hearing, the applicant noted that they would operate part-time hours with 1 weekday off during the week and will work an occasional Saturday. She also stated that she would instruct her clients to use 15th Avenue to get to her home rather than 17th to reduce conflicts with pedestrians if necessary. At their October 9th meeting, the Planning Commission held a public hearing, reviewed the application, and are hereby recommending approval of the application with the conditions noted in the staff report. Staff has added that noted condition above that we've added in recent similar cases in the conditional use permit that, if approved tonight, would be signed and recorded against the property. And I want to apologize to the applicant. She was here tonight, but had to put her kids to bed. And so she tapped me on the back of my shoulder and said she had to take off. If there are concerns from the public, I would ask that maybe the consideration be pushed to the next meeting. Otherwise, if there are no comments from the public, we'll stand by our recommendation to approve it.
Thank you, Mr. Solberg.
And it is not a public hearing, but generally speaking, we have kind of opened it up if there is any concern.
Thank you, Tim. Commissioners, any comments?
Just a quick question, Tim. We've approved these home occupation businesses before. Excuse me, but generally speaking, aren't they by appointment? It's not just not gonna put a sign out on the curb saying drop in and we'll get a haircut or whatever.
Our home-based occupation standards don't allow for them to do a sign. Matter of fact, we did find one in a similar type as a piano business, and we noticed she couldn't do that. She had to take it down. You are allowed a 1 square foot sign on the door, and that's as much as you can have. But yes, she's by appointment only.
And is this just a one-person operation? There's not going to be other stylists there?
Yep, if there were to be other stylists, that would have to be part of the conditional use permit. That is not part of this. It's only herself who lives in the home operating the business.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone from the public that would like to make a comment? All right, seeing none.
If not, I'll make a motion, I guess, to approve with the 3 conditions. We've done this in the past many times, so.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the conditional use permit for home occupation hair salon. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. Motion carries. Item number 4 is the discussion of 100 Cheyenne Street. Mr. Wally Tintus is not here this evening, but I see that Joe Tintus is, so Mr. Solberg, we'll have you start, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. This item had been tabled, and so I requested be brought off the table and considered. We met with Mr. Tintus at the property. Item that he's unable to do because we have a potential project coming up on Cheyenne Street. We have an awarded project coming up on Cheyenne Street. Would be to remove one of his approaches. What he's come up with as a compromise, and also in addition to cutting out his concrete, is using planters that are part of a ballot we've looked at for downtown Cheyenne, same planters that they use in Cheyenne Plaza. He's committed to installing 5 of these large concrete planters in front of the parking lot to sort of meet what the vision of downtown Cheyenne Street was. We met with them on site. Looks like it can work out. Commissioner Simmons was out there with me and feels comfortable in what he's proposed. I'd recommend taking it off the table, approving the change so that he can occupy the space that they've added on.
Thank you, Mr. Solberg. Any questions for Mr. Solberg?
Just the only question is, maybe you touched on, but with the reconfiguration of Cheyenne Street, hopefully this happens in a year or 2. At that time, we'd make the adjustments. We hope to have permanent adjustments.
Yeah, I expect, we haven't designed that street yet, but I expect we'll have on-street parking there and cut out the second approach that he has. It wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for him to add a curb that we're just going to cut out in a year and a half. As a matter of fact, I think we have a moratorium against something like that too. So.
Yeah, and I don't think right now it's the issue. I think what we're trying to,
at
least what I'm thinking, is long-term for that whole area there.
Right now it's really auto-oriented, so he's not really affecting the pedestrian movement unless after Pioneer Plaza gets built, and there's a lot of pedestrian traffic between Pioneer Plaza and Sandy's Donuts, which there probably will be. And hopefully within Wally's spot here too as well in the liquor shop. So,
like Tim said, Commissioner Thorson, I went out there with him, we looked at him, and Wally agreed to the pots. My only concern is, that we make sure we get the right size pots.
Yeah.
We don't want too small ones either. I mean, they need to be, accordingly.
Yeah, and I can't pull it up right now, but I have a pallet, like I said, that we have looked at, and they're ordering from Cheyenne Plaza and POWMI Plaza there. Quite a large footprint concrete planter. So
this would be go ahead. South approach or the north?
This will actually line the front of the parking lot. The idea there was to sort of break up parking from the street so that it's more inviting for people to walk and bike.
I think it's like 5 of them, Commissioner Olson. I think we
committed to 5 of them.
5 of them.
This would block the south driveway that's there, the pot lots would go on.
They won't, but they will not block the south driveway. That'll still be available.
Yeah, he'll have to
correct?
move one onto that
Yeah,
site
right.
later, or maybe buy
But
another
since-
one.
When the street is redone, would that driveway go away?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that was the deal. Yeah, then it'll go away. So.
I don't think it's an issue now, I'm just, again, we're.
Right, yeah, no, that's why we did that, that's exactly right, so.
Any additional questions of Mr. Solberg? Mr. Tintus, would you like to address the commission?
Just a couple of questions. Now, these pots, I assume you're gonna use them up and down Cheyenne Street at some point, or
Well, what we will.
thoughts are that way, or?
Okay. Okay. What we're assuming is we want to try to get the same or similar pots that are going to be in the plaza. So we want you to blend right into
You
that.
bet, you bet.
That's kind of that was the scope of what we talked about. So, and Matt is gone now, and he didn't have them at the time, the pictures. I don't know, Tim, if you've seen them.
We saw the pictures too.
Oh, okay, so I don't know how
I've
big
seen them.
you're looking or anything, but that was the point of it, to blend in with the rest of Cheyenne Street. So we definitely don't want you to be.
Well, my question is farther forward, who maintains them? Dad is willing to plant them and take care of them, but who is gonna take care of them in the future? There are pots, are they the city's pots?
They're your pots, I believe, and you take care of them.
Okay, the city's taking care of the hanging flowers now.
Right.
Are they gonna, in the future, take care of the other pots to maintain a, everything looks the
I think these
same?
would be yours, honestly.
Just something to talk
Yeah,
about.
right, that, we can decide that.
At a
Work
future
that out.
point, so.
We can work that out.
Great question, thank you, Mr. Tintus. Any additional board?
No, I have any comments unless you want to see them.
What's the pleasure of the
I'll make a motion then to approve them with.
Commissioner Simmons moves, second please. Commissioner Thorsted, thank you. Been moved and seconded for the approval of 100 Cheyenne Street for 5 concrete pots for their aesthetic value. Is there any further discussion? Proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business, number 6. Mrs. Fisk, recommendation of a city engineer.
Good evening, President and other commissioners. I'm here with you tonight. I want to explain to you the process that we went through for selection of the individual that would be the first City of West Fargo individual engineer. I'll go through that, and then I will give you a recommendation of the interview group. The City of West Fargo, first of all, I want to say, has contracted with Moore Engineering for many years to manage all of the city's municipal engineering needs. We have designated them in the past decades as the city engineer. During the 2019 budget process, we set a goal of creating an engineering department with a full-time city engineer and 1 full-time support engineering technician. This is not to take away from the phenomenal work that Moore Engineering has done for the city for decades, only to say that we've grown to the point as a city that it is time for us to have a city-hired engineer as an employee. And it's all due to the phenomenal economic residential growth we've had over these many decades. The city engineer position was posted on September 10th and closed on September 28th. We received 13 applications for the position, and 3 applications of those were found to have the appropriate education, qualifications, experience, and skills needed for this position. A panel was put together of West Fargo elected officials and staff to interview these 3 applicants. The panel members were Commission President Bernie Tardis, Commissioner Mark Simmons, myself, Chief of Police Heath Yonke, Human Resources Director Jenna Wilm, and City Attorney John Shockley. Chris Brungard, as Public Works Director, also observed in the interviews but did not provide scores, as he would work directly with this individual laterally, and he knew some of the people that were being interviewed on more of a level. So he was there to just observe. Each interview consisted of the same questions and were scored individually by each member of the panel. After the interviews were completed, the panel combined their scoring and reviewed the average scores for each applicant. Based on the scoring, Dustin Scott was selected to be recommended to you for approval to offer the position of city engineer. During his interview, Mr. Scott demonstrated a clear understanding of the city's engineering needs and ability to lead a department. Dustin Scott has been a resident and native of the city of West Fargo his whole life. He graduated from the University of North Dakota with a master's in engineering, which I must say is really awesome. He's a registered professional engineer in North Dakota and Minnesota, provided the city of West Fargo with municipal engineering services for the past 10 years through his employment with Moore Engineering Incorporated. Most recent work he's done for the city includes advising and leading engineering efforts, providing engineering perspective, guidance, and recommendations to city leadership and elected officials, developing and enforcing city standards and policies, involvement with important city, metro, and regional topics such as major infrastructure projects, the core area infrastructure study, comprehensive planning, the Main Street Initiative, growth, area development, Fargo-Moorhead MetroCog, long-range transportation planning, and FM diversion coordination. When we did the interview process, Dustin rose to the top in many, many levels. His work through Moore Engineering has built him up, along with his other history, to be a very, very outstanding candidate for the city of West Fargo. So at this point, I would request that you make a motion to unappoint Moore Engineering as the city engineer and appoint Dustin Scott as city engineer for the city of West Fargo. I will take any questions.
Questions of Mrs. Fisk?
Do you know what is the effective date?
The effective date would be tonight, and we have a conditional offer letter that we've given to Dustin based on your vote this evening.
And he's accepted if we
yes, he
so
has.
desire?
Yep,
Okay.
and I believe his start date would be October 29th.
So is there any required notification to Moore Engineering as a subcontractor?
We never, Tina and I talked about that. We never approved task order number 1 under the MSA. So we don't, the MSA still continues in place. We just never approved task order 1. You probably want to make the election to designate Dustin city engineer on his start date, because you will need somebody to be the city engineer until Dustin is officially started in that capacity.
So regardless of that, though, back in our reorganization meeting, we appointed Moore Engineering as our city engineer. Do we have to take a formal action to rescind that?
You could do that in one action. You would be unappointing them as a city engineer and appointing Dustin as a city engineer as of October 29th, 2018.
Okay, within those parameters, I guess there is no notification period for discontinuance of service.
No. A point of
we
office.
can get rid of you just like that.
A point of officer. a point of officer serve at the pleasure of the city commission.
Thank you.
My other question would be, is he going to change in any way? Because we like what he's done so far.
Well,
I was going to say he's probably glad those protest people aren't here.
Well, we will be watching that very closely.
Just give me a bit.
Is there any other questions of Mrs. Fisk? Is there a motion?
I would be very proud to make that motion for Dustin Scott to be our new city engineer.
Mr. Mr. Simmons, would you please unappoint Moore also?
I'm sorry, yeah, let's unappoint them two at the same time. I apologize for that.
Effective the 29th.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Been moved and second to unappoint Moore Engineering as the city engineer of record in the city of West Fargo, and recommend Dustin Scott be the city engineer for the city of West Fargo, effective October 29th. Tina's mouthing some of this stuff to me as we're speaking.
No, he caught it before I had to, so.
But I got it. Been moved and seconded. There's further discussion. Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Moving on to item number 7, City Administrator's Report.
Okay, since the evening's been long enough, I'm gonna keep this pretty short and sweet. I just need you to, I don't know if they physically have to vote since they had decided not to. We're gonna need a special meeting or a regular commission meeting on October 29th to consider the special assessments. So I just need a motion, I'm assuming, for that, as well as a second and approval.
You want to make any motions tonight, anybody? I'll make that motion.
Second. And moved and seconded that we hold a special meeting in the city of West Fargo, October 29th. Will it be a totally open agenda, or is it a very designated items such as a special assessment of 40-20 or 40-60 and those types of things?
Well, it is the fifth Monday is no longer your regular meeting date, so it would be a special meeting. So only agenda items could be discussed. You couldn't add additional items unless they're specifically on the agenda.
Then we'd have the next regular session on the next first Monday in November, so we could have back-to-back meetings.
Mayor, could I add, please, to my motion that these are the only items that go on there then?
I'll second that. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
There's a possibility I may not be here, just so you know up front.
Thank you, Brad. Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Quick discussion. If there's action on those assessment districts and the mayor is sitting out and he's got, do we need a super majority or not?
The simple majority, and when someone has a conflict of interest, their spot is not counted in the majority vote. So even if you had one commissioner gone, then it would be 3 of the 4. So it's an interesting thing under the law. When somebody is conflicted out, you don't count their vote. So,
okay, just want to clarify. I didn't want to have a meeting and we couldn't do anything anyway. So,
any correspondence, Mrs. Fisk?
Actually, I do have one piece of correspondence. We received, it was for the entire commission and staff, and it's from the Greater Fargo-Moorhead EDC. And it said, "Hi Tina, thank you, the mayor and the council and your great team for your continued support of the EDC. I look forward to our work in the future." And I just wanted to share that with you. And that's all I have.
Any questions for Tina? For anyone? Commission?
Oh, Dustin has something.
Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Commission President, members of the Commission. I just wanted to say, very excited, very proud and privileged to given the opportunity to accept this position. As you can see earlier tonight, there is still a lot of work to be done to continue to improve the way we offer services from an engineering standpoint within the city. And I am more than ever now motivated to continue to strive to get better, to do things that we haven't done necessarily incorrect, but again, things can always improve. And I know there's a few more engineering people in the audience, and I just wanted to, I can't express enough the last 12 years, again, the world of a wealth of knowledge I've received, experience, the support I've been given from more engineering. I certainly wouldn't be here today if I haven't been able to data dump from all those wise leaders over there. And again, thank you to the commissioners that I've worked with for years, your dedicated support. I know there's ups, downs, and there's pluses, minuses, but I really look forward to spending the rest of my career in the community where I am from and continuing to work with the public and the commission and the wonderful staff that I've grown to love over the last 10 years. So with that, thank you again, and I look forward to it.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Any of the commissioners have anything for the good of the order?
I'm glad I can drive down Cheyenne Street south of
Amen.
You have signal lights at 24th now.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to second it.
Jernevig was right on top.
Yeah, you know, Commissioner Jernevig was just rendering.
I'll let him have the motion.
Mr. Jernevig makes the motion to adjourn. Mr. Simmons seconds it. We stand adjourned.